Asazakura crashed through the walls of the bullet church with a thunderous bellow. The ancient stone walls exploded outward in a tidal wave of rubble and dust, crumbling beneath the immense weight of the demon sumo. With terrifying speed, Asazakura's colossal palm descended toward Yuan and Gatling Man like a falling thunderbolt. Both gun-souls reacted instantly, each in their own way. Yuan twisted backward in a powerful flip, chi surging through his limbs, enhancing every motion with superhuman grace. Gatling Man, on the other hand, vanished in a blink, propelled forward by the same recoil fist variant he had used earlier, a blast of force that displaced his body in an instant. But Gatling Man didn't just dodge. He reappeared in front of Yuan mid-motion, his boot lashing out toward the center of Yuan's chest, straight at his bullet core. This time, Yuan saw it coming. More than that, his heightened vision tracked every detail of the movement. He could see how Gatling Man rerouted the recoil fist's shockwave through his chi pathways and expelled it through mechanical exhaust ports embedded in his armor, redirecting the force to launch himself.
Simple, but efficient.
So simple, in fact, that Yuan copied it on the spot. He activated his own recoil fist, channeling the blast down the right side of his body. The shockwave exploded outward from his pressure points, shredding half his shirt as it tore through his skin, flinging him away from danger.
It hurt like hell.
Unlike Gatling Man's custom-built armor, Yuan's makeshift chi release had no venting system. Every blast seared flesh and stressed muscle. Still, the crude technique worked, and more importantly, it taught him how the recoil fist manipulated internal chi flow. He was already learning. "You copied my technique," Gatling Man growled, skimming around the debris. "You don't know what that power costs." Yuan stayed silent, maneuvering so that Asazakura's massive leg remained between them. He denied Gatling Man a clear line of attack, forcing the metal warrior to reposition. The demon sumo bellowed again, stomping around in an effort to crush them both. But neither gunsoul stood still long enough to be caught. "Our bullets are seeds," Gatling Man continued, circling in search of an opening. Yuan stayed in constant motion, his eyes flicking up briefly, just in time to see Gaiac leaping onto Asazakura's shoulder. The gun tends to them, until they bloom into flowers of death. "Then why try to harvest mine?" Yuan countered, scanning every fluctuation in Gatling Man's aura with surgical precision. He moved to the man's blind left side, where Yuan's own destroyed eye made it easier to feign weakness. Just a bit closer, bait him into using that shockwave again. "I only need to cross the third coil." Gatling Man roared.
Steam hissed from his joints. His body glowed with heat.
"Then I'll burn the gun's path away and become pure metal." Before Yuan could answer, a whistle cut the air. "Gaiac!" Asazakura halted his stomping and entered a deep squat. The demon's hands rose high into the air as he chanted with primal pride. "Dohyo Shiomaki." A translucent sphere of chi erupted from the demon, engulfing the courtyard in a shimmering dome. Salt flooded the ground beneath Yuan's feet, and white dust stung his lungs. The very air turned caustic.
A domain technique?
No, not quite an authority, Yuan assessed. It lacked the divine intensity of Ark's headshot forge. A hybrid barrier and technique merged. He struck the dome's edge, no effect. Asazakura held his stance, clearly maintaining the arena's boundary. They were trapped. And the salt did more than restrict movement. It corroded Yuan's iron skin. Even Gatling Man's metal body groaned in protest.
This had to end fast.
Gaiac leapt into the air and unleashed his grotesque gut tentacles. They rained down from above like a fleshy meteor storm. Yuan didn't strike back. He focused solely on positioning, calculating the exact spot where Gaiac would land, right between him and Gatling Man. Gatling Man took the bait. He charged the moment Gaiac touched ground, fist glowing red-hot. But Gaiac blocked it effortlessly. The resulting shockwave shattered the sound barrier with a familiar sonic boom. Gaiac moved faster than them, without recoil. Just muscle alone. Even so, Gatling Man's technique forced Gaiac onto the defensive. Their clash devolved into a rapid-fire slugfest, punches blurring, pistons slamming, limbs colliding. Shockwaves rocked the arena's edge. They were locked in a brutal stalemate. Neither could spare focus for Yuan.
Perfect.
Yuan observed them like a surgeon awaiting the right incision point. He couldn't beat Gaiac, not without a breakthrough. Gatling Man's bullet core was his only shot. Thanks to the moonburns, Yuan's chi perception had evolved. He could see the flow of power inside Gatling Man's steel body, see the roots of iron entwined around the frame, masking the bullet core. But each time Gatling Man used recoil, the core flared.
It's near his waist.
Yuan only needed a little more time.
A few more recoil pulses to be certain.
Gaiak suddenly exhaled a plume of fire, breaking free of the combo. Gatling Man dodged using another recoil fist.
There. A flicker of chi at his waist, left side. That was it.
Yuan circled to Gatling Man's blind spot and prepared for the kill.
He had one shot.
Yuan activated recoil and surged forward in a burst of speed. Gatling Man turned, fist swinging with killing intent. Yuan expelled chi through his skin, forming a faint black haze around his body.
He called it black haze.
Gatling Man's strike missed, only smoke. Yuan's hand emerged from the mist, piercing his foe's side. Fingers closed around a pulsing mass.
The bullet core.
Gatling Man grabbed Yuan's head in a death grip, fingers crushing his skull. I'll rip your brain from your skew. Yuan yanked the core free mid-sentence. It was a lead round, laced with metal roots. Without hesitation, he shoved it down his throat and swallowed. Gatling Man collapsed like a puppet with cut strings.
You'll become metal, all right, Yuan thought.
The metal of my soul.
For a second, nothing happened. Then power.
The bullet sank into his gut. Metal roots within Yuan bloomed, circuits fusing with flesh.
His senses sharpened.
His mind burned. With a roar that shook the salt-filled dome, Yuan Guang crossed the third coil of infinity. Muscles doubled in mass, stretching against bone. His bullet core's metal roots pulsed, boiling with chi. The raw energy melted away fat, restructured his organs, and erupted from his flesh in a burst of searing smoke, sending him to one knee. A bold gamble, Gaiak mocked, stepping forward and kicking Yuan across the field. Yuan slammed into Asazakura's leg. His nose broke.
Teeth scattered.
Had he not crossed the third coil, his head would have come off clean. Takes time to adapt to a core that's strong. Yuan knew that. But knowledge wasn't experience. Gatling Man's chi now flowed into his own core, and through a body unfit to handle it. It was like forcing 2 liters into a 1-liter container. He fought to cycle the energy fast enough to avoid bursting. Metal roots spread like wildfire beneath his skin, devouring his flesh and reweaving it into a web of steel. His veins transformed into silicon circuits, directing chi through his system. For metallic vents tore open near his scapula, exhaust ports, like Gatling Man's. His legacy, Yuan realized. This is his inheritance. Gaiak paused, eyes narrowing as Yuan's body reshaped. His destroyed skin grew back, now armored with plates of flexible steel. Elemental infusion coated the surface, hardening it to near invulnerability. But the chi kept surging. To avoid imploding, Yuan forced out the excess through both black haze and elemental infusion. Gensmoke spilled from his vents, scorching the air and salt around him. His brain, bones, muscles, all turned to metal. Gaiak struck again, gut tentacles flashing toward Yuan's core. Yuan deflected them with a recoil fist, blasting the attack apart. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. Keep moving. Keep expelling chi.
Or die.
You're adapting already? Gaiak let out a low whistle. How long have you been cultivating? Yuan couldn't remember exactly.
2 weeks.
Gaiak's eyebrows rose. Now that's impressive. A prodigy, late to bloom. Yuan didn't care for the label. Only results mattered. And right now, he was still changing, still unfinished. He had to end this fast. Shame to kill a flower mid-bloom, Gaiak said.
Join us.
It's not too late. I'll pass, Yuan growled, calculating the strike distance. We're even now.
Even.
Gaiak smiled, bird-like and amused.
Let's test that.
His mouth opened, and fire poured out. The inferno exploded toward Yuan in a blink. But Yuan's perception slowed. His newly forged circuits processed information faster than thought. His body moved itself, escaping in a single leap.
Not just strength, he realized.
Memory.
Technique.
The core passed on everything.
Including one move.
Gaiak formed a madra. Would have been a shame to end you BEF.
Yuan struck first.
A recoil shockwave launched him forward in a sonic boom. Heat and smoke followed in his wake. His body adjusted mid-flight, new exhaust ports perfectly balancing his momentum. Gaiak's palms met Yuan's fists, expecting the counter. So Yuan followed up with 100 more. Gatling Man's legacy flowed through him. His fists became pistons, his elbows blurred, every strike enhanced by recoil bursts. Speed and force combined into an unrelenting barrage. The Gatling fist. This time, it was perfectly executed. But Gaiak wasn't a pushover. He countered with short-lived barriers and used his chest eyes to anticipate Yuan's every move. His tentacles intercepted the rest. Until Yuan blinded him. He breathed out black haze at Gaiak's chest, smothering his extra eyes in gunsmoke. One fist slipped through. Then another. A direct hit burst one of the eyes in a geyser of blood. From there, everything collapsed. Blow after blow rained down, face, chest, arms. Gaiak raised his forearms, Yuan shattered them. Tried to breathe fire, Yuan crushed his jaw. Tried to retreat, Yuan drove him back in. Gaiak was cornered, slammed against Asazakura's barrier. Yuan's fists broke his skull, burst his eyes, and tore his gut tentacles apart. Still Yuan didn't stop. His fists split open, metal skin peeling. The barrier cracked under the pressure. But he couldn't stop. Too much chi. Too much pain. Any pause would kill him. His final strike shattered both Gaiak's skull and the barrier. Momentum carried Yuan forward. He tripped among Bullet Church's ruins, crashing to the ground. Blood and brain clung to his fist. Gaiak's body bounced off debris, leaving streaks of red across the stones. As the mist dissolved, Asazakura vanished, the demon undone with his summoner's death. Yuan dropped to his knees gasping. His limbs trembled, spasming from the overload. He couldn't fight another round. Not now. But he didn't trust death to hold Gaiak. He watched the corpse. And the corpse twitched. Yuan raised his revolver, already spinning up a fresh round with item materialization. The bullet, infused with metal chi, fired straight into the mangled corpse. But it slithered away. Gaiak's remains slunk behind debris, tentacles pushing it like a puppet. Yuan stood with effort, pain shooting through his leg. How many more bullets will this take? I'll admit it, Gaiak's voice rasped from behind the stone. You actually killed me. The creature that emerged wasn't human anymore. Teeth lined his stomach. His chest sported new, glimmering eyes. His arms turned into sinewy whips of bone and muscle. My backup core reanimated me, he said through the talking maw in his gut. You're the first I've used the dance of endless mutation on. Yuan's chi sight flared. Of the 7 cores Gaiak once held, only one remained. So did Yuan's strength. His arms bled where the Gatling fist had stripped the metal from his skin. His circuits screamed from overuse. He couldn't do that again. But Gaiak's demon was gone. And the last round was beginning. 1 core left. 1 final round. 1 last stand. ***.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Gaiak swung his whip arms at lightning speeds. Having witnessed Yuan killing Gatling Man by removing his bullet core, he immediately aimed for his own with lethal precision. Yuan quickly shot them both before they could reach him. Fire bullets are incendiary projectiles, Yuan recalled. Earth-created shrapnel, metal bullets are tougher than usual, but nothing special. The bullets he fired carried water and wood-aligned chi respectively. The first turned Gaiak's right whip arm to ice after impact, the other burst into a seedling bud that quickly infected his enemy's flesh with roots and petals. Neither brought him much respite. The boiling blood dripping from Gaiak's arms suddenly burst into flames, melting the ice and burning away the flower bud in an instant. They moved to close on Yuan from both sides in an attempt to catch him. He activated a recoil shockwave in response, though he didn't retreat. Banking everything on offense since his body wouldn't withstand a prolonged duel, and ignoring the pain in his exhaust ports, Yuan threw himself straight at Gaiak's body with his foot first. Gaiak's loss of eyes prevented him from reacting quickly enough to dodge. Yuan kicked Gaiak's torso at supersonic speed, shattering bones on impact. His foot quickly encountered resistance. Muscles tightened and reassembled themselves near the area where he hit, forming a layer of meat that softened the blow and prevented Yuan from reaching Gaiak's core. With his hands too sore to follow up with a punch and Gaiak's whip tentacles closing in on him, Yuan decided to retreat. He quickly released a black haze to shroud his movements and then attempted to leap over Gaiak and strike him from behind. Burning tentacles grabbed him by the left ankle in midair, piercing through his steely skin and the iron muscles beneath. Another lunged for his bullet core, but Yuan managed to catch it with his free hand first. He had to bite his tongue not to scream from the pain of his fingers' flesh melting off his bones. I wanted to pace myself to kill the metallists later, but you've done it, Gaiak confessed with giddiness. A layer of translucent matter covered his eyes like a pair of organic glasses and shielded them from the gunsmoke. I'll fight you with all I have. Yuan answered by aiming for his enemy's torso with his revolver. Gaiak stomped the ground with his foot and summoned a barrier to protect himself. It stopped the first, Non-elemental chi shot. The second, however, carried a spark of fire. The bullet flattened against Gayak's defense, but the explosive burst of flames went through. Although the blast burned the outer layers of Gayak's torso and caused him to stumble, he didn't release his hold on Yuan either. His tentacles coiled around his leg and hand, tightening their grip. Yuan had no choice but to use another recoil shockwave to retreat. The sudden burst of speed let him wrench himself free from Gayak's grasp, but his tentacles sliced off parts of him on the way out. Yuan could see his finger bones in some places, and his left foot hurt so much it wouldn't move again. The pain did help Yuan achieve a certain kind of clarity. Taking a page from Gayak's book, he quickly created a barrier meant to repel only himself to give himself an anchor in midair and control his trajectory. He managed to land on his uninjured right foot a few meters away from Gayak.
What's this?
Yuan noticed a strange change in Gayak. His torso had grown a layer of thick black bark that endured the flames threatening to consume him. Yuan had seen trees with that kind of bark survive wildfires better than most.
How odd.
First the arms, then the eyes, and now this. Yuan finally guessed the nature of Gayak's technique. Adaptation. His body quickly adapts to environmental pressures and attacks. It had to be an innate technique of some kind, and considering Gayak kept it as a trump card up his sleeve, it likely carried certain weaknesses that made abusing it unwise. Yuan needed to probe it further. Following Ark's teaching, Yuan used sniper's bore to lengthen his revolver's barrel until it reached the length of a rifle, then fired a water-aligned bullet at Gayak's left eye. The cultivator's tentacles failed to catch the precise projectile in time, and ice swiftly consumed both his target and the barkskin surrounding it. Both caught fire from a sudden surge of boiling blood.
5 seconds, top.
It took seconds for Gayak's body to mutate when threatened with an attack. It's both limited and automatic too, or he wouldn't have surrendered his first heatproof adaptation. It doesn't heal him either. This tale has been unlawfully obtained from Royal Road. If you discover it on Amazon, kindly report it. There it is, that look of understanding, Gayak said before running at Yuan at full speed. The way you pick up abilities with a mere glance, it's instinctive to you. Is that a quirk of your brain's biochemistry or experience, I wonder? Yuan indeed felt that his brain worked faster since he crossed the third coil, but it could have been adrenaline or insight from the moonburns. He would explore the subject after surviving the fight. Unable to run with his injured foot, Yuan answered by spinning his revolver cylinders until it landed on the wood element bullet chamber, then fired at Gayak's leg. The bullet surprisingly flattened against a barrier, though the butt erupted from it and caught him nonetheless. The time it took for Gayak's flames to consume it gave Yuan a brief second to analyze his defense. Barriers were stationary by design, but Gayak found a workaround. He created short-lived ones from his feet whenever either of them hit the ground. He thus alternated between two overlapping defenses with each step. Fiendishly clever. An innate technique draws from the user's chi, Yuan thought as he quickly reloaded his weapon. If I designed a technique that automatically reacts to attacks, I would design it to use as little chi as necessary to avoid exhausting the user. Which meant that this dance of endless mutation always took the path of least effort when it came to adaptation. It optimized the body to react to the current threat alone, without anticipation or foresight. And change without foresight led to extinction. One of Gayak's tentacles lunged at Yuan's bullet core. Yuan cloaked himself in a short black haze long enough to dodge by rolling to the side, then counterattacked with a water and wood bullet in quick succession. Gayak shrugged off the former, but then hastily dodged the second by leaping to the side. He has guessed my plan, but it's too late. Gayak's body now naturally produced steam and flames in high quantities. The very air bent around him from the heat.
It's hit or die now.
I'm gonna harvest your head, Gayak decided. Your brain, the eyes, the whole package. Try if you dare, Yuan replied. Channeling the recoil kick through his only remaining functioning foot, Yuan propelled himself forward at Gayak, revolver first. A shroud of black haze obscured his weapon and its line of fire. There came the moment of truth. Gayak had shown great caution across the entire battle. When confronted with a new move, he always focused on defense rather than pressing his luck. Yuan avoided using his earth bullet during this final clash, so even if Gayak kept count of the chambers, he knew there was one projectile whose properties he didn't fully understand. However, their current positioning gave him a clear shot at Yuan's bullet core if he chose to go on the offense. One blow with his tentacle could either kill or cripple his foe. Would he risk a potentially lethal surprise for a shot at victory? Would he assume that Yuan wouldn't dare use such a dangerous move if he didn't have a trick up his sleeve, or would he call the bluff? Yuan held his breath as he prayed he hadn't misjudged Gayak.
He hadn't.
Gayak retracted his tentacles, planted them in the ground, then threw himself above Yuan. It was the smartest move in his situation, since his enemy wouldn't have been able to pivot correctly to hit him with his revolver even with black haze obscuring his line of fire, and his other hand was too mangled to sustain a powerful recoil fist.
Or so it seemed.
Quickly spinning in midair, Yuan coated his free hand in a cylinder barrier and pointed up. A few centimeters separated his back from the earth and his arm from Gaiak's body. His eyes widened in surprise as his lethal mistake finally dawned on him.
Recoil blast, Yuan thought.
The detonation threw him to the ground and tore Gaiak apart. Yuan's fingers' bones cracked as compressed air erupted from his makeshift cannon and hit the living kindling. Yuan had guided Gaiak's technique down a predictable path that would maximize his technique's damage, which it did. The cultivator's heated-up body exploded into 1,000 pieces of scorched meat spread all across the courtyard.
Bones, guts, viscera.
Everything went down in flames. Nothing remained of Gaiak other than scraps and boiling blood. He didn't reassemble himself again. Everyone was only one slip-up away from death on the battlefield.
It's over.
Yuan lowered his revolver and coughed black oil rising from his lungs.
I've won.
Victory well and truly exhausted him, but he had prevailed nonetheless. He had defeated 2 powerful cultivators in a row and crossed the 3rd coil. Yuan sat on his knees and allowed himself to catch his breath, then took a good look at the sky above his head. Gray and black clouds accrued over Flesh Market, melding with the smoke from the fires consuming it. Webs of flesh had consumed many buildings and crushed emerging screen towers. Yuan could tell which way this war was going. His bullet core suddenly pounded in his skull at an accelerated rate. A sense of overwhelming dread filled his bones, alongside the acrid smell of burning artillery shells. What's that shiver down my spine? Yuan's survival instinct flared up, telling him to run, to flee, to get the hell out of Flesh Market. A malevolent aura filled the air. Yuan recognized it as Gaiak's, but stronger, more overwhelming. He glanced at the pieces around him, suddenly fearing he hadn't done a good enough job at finishing off the man. Gaiak's remains failed to move, but a tentacle of flesh suddenly burst out of the ground next to him. An enormous flower of blood and pulsing muscles bloomed from the debris, unveiling a lanky, hooded figure within its heart. The man, Yuan assumed it was one from his long white beard filled with festering maggots, leaned over on a gnarled staff of bones, his face shrouded and impenetrable. Yuan saw a glimpse of true horror lurking beneath his tattered rags, a torso of amalgamated flesh and twisted organs, alongside the outlines of tormented faces stitched together in a gruesome parody of a body. A metal list survivor? Dozens of eyes peered at Yuan from under the hood, gleaming with malevolence. The man's oppressive aura matched that of revolvers in terms of power.
No, a gunsoul. Pitiful. An elder.
Polio, Yuan guessed, to his utter despair. The Flesh Mansion sex leader had come to check on his apprentice.
Fuck. Eh.
Elder Polio gazed upon his apprentice's remains without sparing Yuan a glance.
Why should he?
There was no way Yuan could have taken him in a fight at his best, let alone in his current state, and they both knew it. Still, he wondered why the man hadn't killed him yet. It would have been so easy. You've damaged my apprentice quite a bit, the elder mused while stomping the ground with his staff. Disembodied hands of rotting flesh emerged from the ground to grab Gaiak's mangled parts and gather them.
A shame.
I was very proud of this design. While Elder Polio planted his staff in the earth and began a series of mudras, Yuan subtly used item materialization to create new bullets and reload his revolver. The elder underestimated him, the same way any high-level cultivator looked down on everyone else. It might give him an opportunity to escape with judicious use of black haze and projectiles. But Yuan could hardly focus with his bullet core pounding harder than a maddened piston in his skull. Was it going to burst out in his head if he failed to cycle through the 3rd coil properly? Varada, Pushpaputa, Vajrapradama. Elder Polio completed a mudra sequence and then traced a circle around his apprentice's remains. Mend the splintered flesh. Virulent chi erupted from the elder and filled the circle. A tense silence fell upon the ruins for a few seconds. Then the pile of flesh pieced itself back together. This is a nightmare, Yuan thought, praying to the wayfinders that his eyes deceived him. Gaiak's remains reassembled into a mass of quivering meat.
It can't be.
Do not look so surprised, child, Elder Polio taunted him. If you were in my place, would you bother looking for a naturally occurring prodigy when you could just create one? Twice in a row, a tumorous parody of Gaiak's face emerged from the blob of flesh and organs his body had become. His half-formed, mangled limbs struggled to carry him, but he was alive again. You're too much. He was never human in the first place, Yuan realized. His master pieced him together from various unwilling subjects. And though Gaiak was still missing pieces, they had a choice third coil donor freshly available. He had to run now. Yuan attempted to trigger his recoil shockwave and flee, but a spasm of pain instead coursed through his back. His exhaust ports coughed smoke rather than chi. His own technique failed him. You think I will let you run away? Elder Polio chuckled under his beard. What of Asa Zakura, apprentice? I smell him in the air. Gone, master, Gaiak replied nonchalantly. My first death banished it. The contract was broken? Elder Polio grunted in annoyance. Foolhardy apprentice, securing that fiend's allegiance cost us 6 Haitobashira. It will take us weeks to renew it. His cold, dismissive tone, the kind a warehouse owner would use to describe useless equipment, boiled Yuan's blood. Do the lives of others, Yuan coughed gunsmoke, mean nothing to your kind? As fuel for our arts, they most certainly matter. Elder Polio stomped the ground with his staff. Which part of him should I preserve, my apprentice? The head, Gaiak replied, his eyes staring at Yuan's skull with what could pass for lurid desire. I want his head and his heart. As you why? Elder Polio suddenly stomped the ground with his staff so fast Yuan's eyes couldn't follow his movements. A thick wall of hands, bones and human muscles formed around him and Gaiak right as gunshots echoed behind Yuan. A projectile blasted it with smoke and fire. To Yuan, it seemed like a shooting star of golden chi hit the elder's shell of flesh from above, followed by a shower's worth of them. They vaporized its outer layers, forcing Polio to summon more organic mass from nothing to repel them. One shot went through his protective shell and vaporized Gaiak until nothing but steaming guts and viscera remained. Elder Polio took a shot to the shoulder, but managed to regenerate his defense before it collapsed entirely. When the bombardment was completed, Elder Polio's bunker of flesh resembled a charred fruit's shell breaking at the seams. Yuan looked up at the Bullet Church's wreckage. A man stood atop the ruins, a revolver in each hand. Stolen from Royal Road, this story should be reported if encountered on Amazon. Stand up, Yuan. Revolver cocked his guns. He looked quite pleased with himself. A gunsoul does not kneel before a pile of trash. He spoke with such easy moxie and confidence that Yuan couldn't help but feel inspired. He grit his teeth, used item materialization to create a makeshift metal brace to help his wounded foot and powered through the pain enough to force himself back up. He continued to cycle his chi as fast as he could, though the pain remained sharp, his body began to feel less sluggish. How long were you there? Yuan rasped under his breath. Since that mutant summoned the sumo, Revolver replied as he leaped to Yuan's side. His guns were squarely aimed at Elder Polio's flesh cocoon, waiting for him to come out. Could have broken through the barrier and lent a hand, but I figured you would have resented me for it. Yeah. Yuan would probably have refused help. Killing Gaiak was something Yuan had to do by himself, if only to prove that he could win on his own. Thanks for the assist. No, thank you for luring this piece of shit out. Revolver slightly cracked his neck. Been waiting forever for this one. Elder Polio's wall of muscles ruptured open at last. Revolver immediately fired a chi-charged shot at it only to blast an empty shell. A flower of flesh surged from the ground a few meters away, unveiling the old man hiding within. You have broken my apprentice again? Elder Polio seethed with anger and malevolence as he revealed himself once more. Wasn't your first death enough of a lesson, Revolver? Revolver scoffed. You've got no thrall to shoot me in the back this time. You're still the same weakling slave unfit to be a graft. Polio stomped the ground with his staff. A bad investment from start to finish. You should have kept the receipt. Revolver tightened his grip on his weapons. You best get out of Dodge, Yuan. My trump card doesn't discriminate. Revolver grunted in pain, his hands reaching for the back of his skull. A wave of agony surged from Yuan's bullet core at the same time, sharp and visceral. A terrible sensation of metal piercing through his brain burned his iron nerves and coursed through his circuits. A phantom pain that was so familiar, so unforgettable, because it was the last he experienced before his death and rebirth. Yuan Guang lived through his murder all over again. His scream echoed with the low sound of distant gunshots and the sharp clinks of bullet casings falling on the ground. Attention coursed through the air, followed by the thick burnt aroma of discharged weapons and the acrid scent of burning oil. A savage aura of chi blanketed all of Flesh Market. Elder Polio sensed it too. His hooded face stared up at the gun-smoke-filled sky, where gray rain clouds blanketed the city in thick shadows. The storm's thunder sounded like an artillery bombardment and fire explosions set it alight instead of lightning. What have you done? He whispered under his beard. What have you done? Yuan couldn't tell why. But he knew what. Every fiber of his chi roots quivered in anticipation, like children calling their daddy home. His bullet core trembled with excitement. Detonations erupted above his head as a prelude for incoming calamity. "There are too many of you in one place," Elder Polio muttered to himself, his words laced with an emotion Yuan never thought he would hear from an elder: fear. "You're doomed us all, accursed fools." Elder Polio summoned another shell of flesh to protect himself, but it was likely too little too late. Revolver powered through the pain to look at the sky with what could pass for quiet acceptance. "It finally came for me, eh?" he said calmly. The gun announced its coming with a rain of bullets. The gunsmoke thunderclouds unloaded a downpour of lead rather than water. Millions upon millions of projectiles fell upon Flesh Market in a devastating cacophony of gunshots and detonations, each and every single one of them charged with chi. Yuan immediately formed a barrier around Revolver and himself, with his mentor doing the same. Two layered domes surrounded them in an instant, both specifically designed to stop an attack which they instinctively understood and mastered early in their journey. They bunkered down as the rains of destruction fell upon Flesh Market. The heavens' judgment leveled the city to the ground. A bombardment mightier than what any sect could have possibly organized hit the entire city from above in a deluge of gunfire. Weaker buildings were instantly vaporized, their entire structures reduced to dust in the blink of an eye. The stronger ones swiftly shattered into piles of stone and steel. The city's outer walls held for a time under the onslaught, but the continued impacts and repeated shockwaves caused them to crack and collapse one after another. Explosions rocked the city and leveled it to the ground in a deafening symphony of death.
None were spared.
From the Metalist screen towers to the Flesh Mansion sect's organic corruption, they all took the brunt of the indiscriminate bombardment. Polio materialized a barrier around himself the moment the rain shredded his flesh shell apart, but he hadn't spent enough time around Gunsoles to properly tune it. Chi-charged bullet droplets vaporized his head and chest at lightning speed, incinerating his clothes and flesh. The downpour riddled him with holes and then annihilated what little scraps tied them together. For a long moment that seemed to stretch on forever, Yuan could only stare blankly at this vision of utter annihilation unfolding around him. Only when the smoke and dust became too thick for him to see did a fearful thought finally manage to worm its way into his consciousness. Holster and Orient were still in the city. Horror seized Yuan to such a degree that his own barrier wavered for a moment, with Revolver barely holding it up. He prayed to the Wayfinders that his allies had sensed the disaster and evacuated early, because if they hadn't.
Not again.
Yuan had already lost a team once, he refused to outlive another one. The wound was still too fresh in his mind. He couldn't let Holster and Orient perish when their lives had only just begun. The downpour ended as suddenly as it began. The wild chaos of the battle and the great gunfire cacophony that followed left the city in a heavy, terrifying silence. So thorough was the cataclysm that Yuan couldn't see farther than his own feet. Dust covered everything else. "Yuan," Revolver said as their barriers finally collapsed, his voice calm but firm.
"Yuan? Yuan."
"Yes." Yuan muttered under his breath, his mind still struggling to process the devastation around them.
"You run."
The ground trembled beneath their feet, followed by the noise of whirring cylinders coming from the smoke. "You run and you don't look back." Calamity beckoned. An overwhelming flood of malevolent chi engulfed Flesh Market. A tidal wave of phantom gunpowder and searing hot air suffocated Yuan, causing what remained of his iron lungs to burn within his chest. The same oppressive sensation of danger he experienced in Manhattan's presence overcame him once again. This time it was wilder though, violent and bombastic. Manhattan had been a quiet death, cold and unfeeling. The gun's presence instead cast a shadow of savage and indiscriminate destruction, an incoming threat of mindless, maniacal violence. Yuan Guan was no coward and not one to back down from a fight, but he was not an unreasonable man. He knew he stood no chance against a demigod capable of razing an entire city to the ground in the blink of an eye. So he followed Revolver's advice. Yuan ran towards the Bullet Church's ruins. He wanted to rejoin with Orient and Holster to confirm their survival. They had to have survived, and then escape the city. Nothing else mattered. He hardly managed to walk 2 steps before collapsing among the ruins. His legs spasmed mid-motion and caused him to trip up. Pain coursed through his feet, then upward across his back, everything below the waist going numb.
"Yuan."
Revolver rushed to his side.
"Yuan, stand up."
"You can't stay here." "Can't move." Yuan clenched his feet and tried to power through the pain, to no avail. His own legs refused to obey him.
"Won't too much."
Gaiak warned him that it took a while for a body to adjust to crossing the third coil, and that was before he pushed himself to the limit to defeat his enemy. His limbs now suffered from his performance's backslash. He heard Revolver curse under his breath. The older Gunsol grabbed his arm and pulled it over his shoulders. "Hold on, kid," Revolver told him before whistling. The roar of his cruiser resonated across the smoke, though it was hardly audible over the encroaching symphony of whirring cylinders and gunshot steps. "We'll pull through this." He was lying. A great tremor shook the earth near them, followed by a searing heat wave that nearly set Yuan's remaining clothes on fire. A great shadow loomed over the Gunsols and blanketed them in thick darkness. Yuan looked up. And up. And up. The gun towered over the Gunsols like a mountain made of lead and steel. The brief glimpse Yuan caught during his revival didn't do the real thing justice. It was over 3 times Asazakura's height, a walking metal fortress with monstrous gun barrels for hands and a rifle for a face. Its emaciated parody of a humanoid form was a monstrous mix of charred bones and burned flesh melting together with oily metal. Mounted artillery cannons fumed on its shoulders, and an ammo belt tail whipped the ground in its wake. Its entire body breathed gunsmoke and death, its maw open to reveal rows of lead shells for fangs. Death by firearms glared down on them, and Revolver shot it in the face. A bullet packing more chi than Yuan could muster in his entire core hit the gun with enough power to blow Orient all the way to the nowhere. It surged out of Revolver's barrel like a blazing comet and detonated into a fireball larger than Asazakura himself. So bright was its glow that Yuan had to cover his eyes not to go blind, and even then the impact blew out a wave of hot air that threw dust in his face. The gun didn't even flinch. Everything that followed was a blur. Revolver fled with Yuan on foot at bullet speed, crossing the ruins by running even faster than Orient could drive. They rushed past piles of wrecked cyborgs and the lead-riddled remains of their enemies across a wasteland of the dead. The gun caught up to them in a single bound. Its mere movement sent shockwaves rippling across the air, blasting away debris and creating a vast crater on impact. Yuan and Revolver were thrown at burning wreckage with greater force than Gatling Man's punches, the latter losing his grip on the former. Yuan bounced off piles of debris and soon ended up laying face-first on the ground. Ensure your favorite authors get the support they deserve. Read this novel on Royal Road. Away. The sound was so soft, so weak, that Yuan hardly recognized the word. Yuan turned to look up at the gun looming over him. The giant monster could have stomped the young Gunsol to paste with a single step, but it did no such thing. Its gun arms pressed against both sides of its barrel face like a man struggling with a potent headache. Run away. The gun's screech carried the painful clicks of 1,000 triggers, drowned out by the whirring of its countless cylinders. Get away. What was that pain sound coming out of its maw? Black oil droplets dripped down the gun's barrel and fell near Yuan, carrying both the smell of rancid salt and the acrid tang of gunpowder. "Are you?" Yuan blinked in utter disbelief. "Crying?" The gun wailed. Had Yuan been a scrap, his eardrums would have ruptured from the sheer noise. The gun's scream threw him back and spread vibrations across the air. The shoulder cannons soon fired an artillery barrage at random, sending heavy projectiles across the smoking desolation. One of them nearly hit Revolver, who counterattacked with chi bullets of his own. His shots would have killed the likes of Gaiak in a single hit, but failed to make the gun budge nor take notice. The monster continued to unload its payload without rhyme nor reason. The sight reminded Yuan of a godlike child reveling in tearing down a human anthill. The gun was mindless violence and mayhem incarnate. Almighty power without purpose. With nowhere to run and nowhere to go anyway, Yuan decided he wouldn't perish without a fight. He barely managed to move his hands enough to coat his arm in a cylinder barrier. Recoil. Bloss. A bullet coming from the west shattered Yuan's barrier before he could complete his technique. Yuan had expected this, but neither the shot's direction nor its chi signature. He immediately recognized it. Ak. His own mentor had sniped him from leagues away. Why? Yuan's confusion was only matched by the sting of betrayal. Why? He didn't have much time to think. The gun finally deigned to focus on him, light building up inside its barrel nose for a fatal shot. Yuan glared back at the face of his incoming death, refusing to beg nor kneel. A metal locomotive rammed into the gun from the east in a cataclysmic collision. Yuan could only stare in disbelief as a familiar spirit train hit his own patron demigod at phenomenal speeds. Something so big and so long shouldn't move faster than a bullet, yet it did. A feng shui corridor of chi propelled it forward with such force that it pushed the gun back and caused it to misfire. A shining chi meteor erupted from its barrel head and surged at the horizon. A devastating explosion rocked distant hills and reduced them back to rubble. Orient. Yuan brimmed with joy once he noticed Holster's familiar chi presence on board. Moreover, through some miracle, the spirit train appeared to have been untouched by the gun's bombardment. Thank the Wayfinders, they're alive. His relief lasted until the gun pushed back against the spirit train, Its inhuman might more than a match for Orient's bulk and speed. The monster stopped the vehicle dead in its tracks and prepared to fire at the locomotive at point-blank range. A chi-charged bullet hit the gun from the west. Revolver's projectiles failed to leave a dent in the demigod of ultraviolence, but arcs blasted off half its metal face and caused it to flinch. It produced no mighty fireball nor blinding flash of chi. In fact, the only hint that it was a bullet that hit the creature instead of an artillery cannon was the lack of smoke or wide explosion that followed. The hit was subtle in its appearance and devastating in its execution. The gun's head snapped in the surprise attack's direction, ignoring the spirit train trying to drive over it.
Ark, the gun rasped. Please.
Hearing his mentor's name coming out of that creature only confused Yuan more. What's going on here? Ark's actions didn't make any sense. Why would she attack the gun after preventing Yuan from doing the same? If Ark had wanted Yuan dead, she could have hit his bullet core easily enough. Did she want him to focus on running away rather than fighting the gun? Something wasn't right here. The gun didn't leave him time to think things through. The monster let out an agonizing wail, then kicked the spirit train away with all of its monstrous strength. The locomotive derailed to the side with a loud boom, its wheels spinning on empty air, its chimney helplessly breathing smoke into the ruins. Revolver jumped to rejoin Yuan. Your friends are on board that train, he told his protege with a grim, heavy tone. Are you ready to wager your life to save them? Yuan grit his teeth and nodded sharply. He refused to let Orient and Holster perish, whether Ark allowed it or not.
Yes. Revolver chuckled.
Then brace yourself. He holstered his guns, then joined his hands into a series of madras. However, no verbal madra escaped Revolver's mouth. He instead chose to sing a low humming tune. I call upon luck, the fairest judge, Revolver whistled to the wind. Chambers loaded, let's play. A wave of metal chi erupted around Revolver before quickly engulfing Yuan. It expanded outward until it reached the gun and caught it like a fish in a net. The energy solidified into a ring that trapped the three of them at the exclusion of everything else. Yuan at first thought that Revolver had used a barrier until he sensed a veil falling upon him. Reality itself twisted within the circle's confines, bending space and time. Revolver's will overflowed from his body and seeped into the world. Its gravity warped the very fabric of existence.
An authority.
He said he was pushing towards the fifth coil, Yuan recalled, though he hadn't expected his fellow gunsoul to have reached it yet.
This is his trump card.
Two pull the trigger, one walks away. Revolver chanted as the Tao itself bent to his will. Steel and chance no longer wait. A sniper's bullet struck Revolver in the jaw and blasted half of it away in an attempt to silence him. Far too late. Death's roulette seal our fate. The light of Revolver's soul swallowed Yuan and the gun alike. The world became a roof, a set of walls, and a skull-faced table. The ruins of Flesh Market transformed into an empty saloon smelling of cigarettes and cheap alcohol. There were no doors or windows, with only a single flickering lamp above the central table for a light source. Yuan found himself sitting in a chair, with Revolver and the gun on his left and right respectively. The latter had shrunk from a giant to a human-sized avatar of itself, its cannon hands replaced with metal fingers. Yuan's weapon and wounds were gone, as were Revolver's own. No violence could take place within these walls. None of the players could harm each other, except through the game. 3 golden revolvers lay on the table, one for every participant. 3 deaths slumbered within 3 of their chambers each. 1 kill shot for each player. By pressing the gun against their head and firing, a player had 1 chance out of 6 to kill another player or themselves. They had no way of opening the chamber and checking before pulling the trigger, and nobody could leave or enter the pocket dimension until it claimed a life. Yuan knew this instantly. Information poured into his mind by the power of the authority in a complex sutra script, teaching him the rules of the final game one of the 3 competitors would ever play. This was, without a doubt, the world's purest contest of luck and guts. The law of the authority would allow no cheating nor foul play to taint it. The promised death would strike the loser no matter their rank or power. Slaves and slavers, scraps or cultivators, gods or men. None would survive death's roulette. No defense or intervention would protect the loser from their fatal fate. Not even the authority's creator would be spared. Within this imaginary space, even reality followed the rules. Death would switch from an outcome into a certainty. This place was Revolver's wish embodied, a place where all were equal before death's uncaring barrel. The gun was the first of them to grab their weapon, doing so with eagerness. Revolver quickly imitated it with a fearless laugh that inspired Yuan to follow his lead. I warned you, my trump card doesn't discriminate. Revolver pressed his gun against his head.
Ready, Yuan?
No, Yuan replied before grabbing his weapon. He had already known death once, and he wasn't in a hurry to experience it again. But this is the only chance we have. The gun was too strong for them to defeat in a standard gunfight, even if Yuan himself had been in top shape. Having more participants slightly increased their mathematical odds of slaying the gun through this authority if Yuan counted correctly. It was the most rational course of action for them to take if any of them hoped to survive. It was the only way to keep Holster and Orient safe. So Yuan hardened his resolve and pressed his weapon to his temple.
Let's go. The gun shot first.
It pressed its revolver into its maw and pulled the trigger with what could pass for desperation. The first shot was a blank, but it kept trying to shoot itself before the chambers could align properly. Revolver fired a blank into his head, the blast's damage cancelled by Death's Roulette no-violence rule. His aim was steady, but the way his hand wavered betrayed the tension in his fingers. Yuan held his breath and pulled the trigger. A shiver ran down his spine as he heard the gunpowder ignite inside this weapon. The shadow of death passed over him, ready to take him back to the nowhere.
A blank hit his skull.
The impact was soft, almost gentle. Yuan's relief only lasted until the cylinder turned and switched to a new chamber holding an unknown projectile. His finger wavered on the trigger.
Am I afraid?
Yuan had fought many battles without hesitation, yet his hand now trembled. There was something deeply unnerving about turning one's own weapon against themselves. Like he was flirting with death instead of challenging it. Something about the gun's behavior knotted Yuan's stomach too. Its enthusiasm for playing Death's Roulette contrasted with its earlier cries and pleas. It's not trying to kill us, Yuan realized. It's trying to kill itself. If the gun wanted to die so badly, why didn't it simply blow itself up? It had more than enough firepower to do so. Did it attack Flesh Market hoping to find a gun soul that could do the job? But why would Ark try to prevent Yuan and Revolver from fulfilling its wish then? His mentor's name echoed in his head like a dire warning. Even if you kill the gun, you will never kill the gun. A terrible shiver ran down Yuan's spine as a trio of gunshots silenced his thoughts. He hadn't even noticed his finger pulling his revolver's trigger. Had the authority compelled him, or did he simply lose his nerve? Whatever the case, it didn't matter.
Somebody else died.
Yuan couldn't tell whether which shot settled the matter, but he immediately identified the loser all the same. A hole appeared on the back of the gun's head, bleeding oil. You might be reading a stolen copy. Visit Royal Road for the authentic version. A tense, agonizing silence settled between the shocked contestants. The monster sat still for a second, its arms going limp and its fingers letting go of the golden revolver. It collapsed headfirst onto the table, a puddle of oil spreading from its skull. Death's Roulette had claimed its victim. The authority collapsed onto itself immediately afterward, with reality snapping back to its normal state. The saloon crumbled to reveal the ruins of Flesh Market. The revolver in Yuan's hand was gone, replaced with Holster's custom gift. The gun returned to its true immense shape, but the lethal wound it suffered within Death's Roulette carried over. The colossus pitifully collapsed on its left side with a final whimper. Its immense hide landed with a surprisingly low thump that silenced its whirring and clicking. Time seemed to grind to an abrupt halt for a moment. The only noise in the air came from the spirit train's wheels turning in the air and the crackling embers of Flesh Market's ashes. The gunsouls stared at their dead patron, half expecting it to rise back up and finish them off. Fuck, Revolver muttered to himself after putting his broken jaw back into place. Like Yuan, it took him a while for his mind to accept the impossible truth. I've killed the gun. As incredible as it sounded, he was right. The gun's corpse began to rust away before their very eyes. Its metal parts became orange dust and its flesh swiftly rotted to nothingness. It was like witnessing the ravages of centuries compressed in a minute's time. Revolver's subdued surprise soon turned to pride and joy. I killed the gun, he shouted with a laugh. Look, Yuan. I created this authority for just this occasion, but I never thought it would actually work. Yuan was too tense to share his enthusiasm. His feeling of unease hadn't diminished in the slightest, and his bullet core continued to pound hard inside his skull. The gun had perished ignominiously, its body quickly degrading back to rust, but the omnipresent threat of incoming calamity remained strong. That was too easy. Even with an authority, it shouldn't have been that easy. Every fiber of Yuan's body told him that he had missed a key detail. A crimson blur landed near the gun's carcass, the ground turning to a bullet carpet at its contact. Yuan immediately recognized Ark's Qi long before the dust settled around her. It didn't surprise him that a cultivator of her caliber could cross the distance between Flesh Market and her lair within minutes on foot. She had managed to snipe him from that far away earlier after all. What shocked him was that she showed up at all. Ark had warned him that her cracked bullet core prevented her from controlling her authority, and he could see the result now. A hastily conjured barrier struggled to contain Headshot Forge within a 5-meter radius of Ark, warping reality around her until it transformed the ground into a fertile ammo field. From her strained facial expression and the sheer amount of chi leaking from her, containing her own technique without a ley line demanded a tremendous effort from her part. No, she muttered to herself, ignoring Yuan and Revolver alike to examine the gun's remains. Her voice brimmed with sorrow. No, Jim, please no, not again. Who the hell are you? Revolver asked, one of his guns swiftly finding its way to his hand. Are you the gal who shot me earlier?
Ark didn't answer.
She knelt next to the pile of rust the gun had become, which a gust of wind swiftly blew away. A man's corpse lay amidst the ashes, his sweater and pants were riddled with gunshot holes. 'Twas a young teenager many years younger than Yuan himself, with lustrous blonde hair stained red by blood pouring out of his head's wound, the same that killed the gun. His pale white eyes stared at the sky with an expression of relief. Ark tightly cradled his hand with her own, a deep scowl of defeat all over her face. What's going on here? Revolver asked, his joy replaced with confusion. I don't unders. His words turned into a scream of agony. Yuan's head snapped in his ally's direction as he collapsed to his knees, his hands holding onto his skull as if he were suffering from a monstrous headache. A malevolent aura of crimson bloodthirst enveloped Revolver, followed by a suffocating pressure of demonic chi. Gunsmoke fumes swirled around the gunsole, taking on the shape of skulls riddled with small explosions. A gun's barrel burst out of Revolver's forehead. Yuan froze in horror as his fellow gunsole's wail turned into a symphony of whirring cylinders and clicking triggers. His helmet face opened to reveal rows of growing gunshell fangs. Children screaming at school, soldiers rattling in the trench, snipers bleeding in the jungle. Revolver screamed, his words ringing with gunfire and artillery booms, his voice growing more metallic. Food for the firing squad. Meat for the lead grinder and the gunpowder pit. It was then, when Yuan took a good look at Revolver's chi, that everything fell into place. Why the gun craved death, yet encouraged others to flee rather than fight. Why Ark tried so hard to prevent either gunsole from killing the creature without inflicting lethal damage, and why Gatling Man called it a curse he had to free himself from. The gun wasn't an individual.
It was a title. A curse to be passed on.
No way Yuan could accept this. Revolver. He hardly crawled half a meter closer to his ally before a bullet hit the ground in front of him, pushing him back. Back off, Ark said, her rifle arm pointed at Revolver. He's already doomed.
And worst of all, she was right.
Yuan could tell from the way Revolver glared at him with hardly contained bloodlust. The malicious aura of unfettered violence surrounding him only grew more menacing. The very essence of death by firearms overwhelmed his fellow gunsole's body and mind, quickly reshaping him from a man into an incarnation of murder. Riddle them all with holes. Revolver's mouth foamed oil at the seams. Have to shoot something, someone. Revolver raised his namesake weapon, and for a very brief second Yuan thought he would turn it in his direction. However, it seemed a sliver of his ally's humanity struggled against the demon he was quickly turning into. Revolver turned his gun on himself and pulled the trigger. It jammed. He tried against and again to shoot himself, to no avail. The gun's curse had taken hold of him, denying him any escape that wouldn't further its cycle of destruction. Revolver's cruiser drove to his side. Unlike the Spirit Train, it suffered damage from the previous gun's rainfall, its steel hide riddled with so many holes that Yuan wondered how it could still drive. Yet it answered its master's call anyway, thrumming and waiting at his side even as he transformed into a monster. Can't resist bloodlust, too strong. Too strong. Revolver threw away his namesake's weapon and moved towards his ride. Get away, Yuan, must get away. Then run, Ark said with a voice full of pity. Run into the wasteland to seek your demise. Yuan powerlessly watched Revolver climb onto his cruiser. The very man who had helped him bounce back from his first death underwent a monstrous fate worse than death, and he couldn't do jack shit. Forgive me. Revolver grabbed his cruisier's handle the best he could, even as his fingers turned into barrels. Forgive me. His cruiser's wheels burned brightly and carried the spirit machine across the ruins. Yuan watched Revolver disappear into the distance and the endless wasteland sprawling across the horizon, searching for victims or for the sweet release of death. Yuan looked around himself. Ark, who knew and said nothing, cradled the previous gun's corpse with sorrow and regret. The city lay in ruins, its inhabitants were probably slain to the last man, woman and child, and the spirit train had derailed. Even the sight of holster, bucket, and a few survivors crawling out of the machine gave Yuan no sense of fulfillment. The battle for Flesh Market had finally concluded.
And nobody won.
Yuan buried Gaiak and Polio in the city of the dead. Telling which pieces of meat belonged to them and which ones belonged to the thousands of victims that the gun claimed today was a difficult task, even with his chi sight. The bombardment shredded them to pieces alongside Gatling Man's remains and countless others. Throwing them into a ditch proved much easier than digging individual graves. Yuan didn't want to give his enemies a fair burial out of respect, since none of them deserved it, but while a cultivator's hungry ghost was a pale shadow of what they were while alive, they remained very dangerous. Yuan had no intention of allowing his dead foes to torment the living any longer. Yuan had heard tales that the death song allowed hungry ghosts to linger after death to give them one last chance to settle their affairs and pass on to their next life without regrets. Others said it was to force the living to take responsibility for their dead and ensure a fair burial for everyone.
If so, then she had succeeded.
Yuan had spent the better part of the day carrying corpses around to a trench dug by Bucket and the others where Holster had been giving the dead the last rites sutra non-stop, silently praying for their souls. Other men gathered everything they could salvage onto the spirit train, mostly pieces of metal-less tech, weapons, or supplies that survived the bombardment. Getting the vehicle upright again had taken a lot of effort, even with Yuan's own superhuman strength. From what Yuan gathered, Orient saved her passengers from the bullet rain by creating a barrier around herself with Holster's help. He guessed that spending days around him gave them enough insight to defend themselves against the gun's bombardment. The rest of the city didn't fare as well. The gun's visit thoroughly destroyed every building in town and leveled the ground to such a degree that even the sewers and basements turned into tombs. They'd only managed to find a handful of survivors hiding so far, and the encroaching sunset would put an end to those searches soon. Moreover, Orient could only rescue around 100 people, mostly a handful of Bullet Church armed men, their families and civilians who took refuge with the cult. Hardly enough manpower to cover a ghost town of Fleshmarket size. Too many corpses, Yuan thought grimly as he tossed his enemy's remains into a trench filled with hundreds of human remains. Too few gravediggers. Not only were hundreds of dead people still undiscovered and likely to become hungry ghosts by the next day, but the gun's bombardment also contaminated the city's water reservoir with lead. It could no longer sustain itself even if the survivors stuck around to rebuild it.
Fleshmarket was doomed.
At least Yuan could walk again. His broken foot had healed enough to let him stand, though his body ached in so many different places. He would need to find a moment to cycle through his chi in order to fully complete his third coil transformation. When Bucket and the others finished covering the trench with dirt, Yuan took a good look at the sky. The sunset encroached over the horizon. They had run out of time.
Nightfall comes upon us, Yuan said.
Prepare to board on the spirit train. One of the gravediggers dared to ask him the question on everyone's lips. Board it to where? Yuan had no idea, but anywhere would be safer than a ghost-infested city. Prepare to board, he insisted before patting Holster on the shoulder.
You did well.
I'll join you and Orient in a minute. He had one last person to pick up before leaving Fleshmarket. Holster nodded obediently, then returned to Orient with most of the survivors. Only one of them remained behind, staring at Yuan through his helmet with empty eyes. Sir, Bucket said, his voice quiet and subdued.
Yuan froze.
Bucket hadn't spoken a word since he had stepped off the spirit train to witness the devastation. All of his cheery zeal had turned into quiet, grim contemplation. Is this what the gun father wanted for us? Bucket asked, his gaze turning to the destroyed city around them, a smoking ruin agonizing under a smoke sky. Death to the world? Yes, Yuan replied bluntly. He saw no point in indulging Bucket's delusions, especially not after this.
The gun is not a god.
It's just another mindless killer with more power than most. He expected Bucket to insult him or go into another religious tirade, but he did no such thing. The man remained quiet for a while, taking in Yuan's words. None of his fellow cultists had celebrated Fleshmarket's destruction either. After this, they'd probably realized that they had projected their own beliefs onto an entity that couldn't care less for them. They had played at war, only to find that they'd been worshipping the slaughter all along. If you value anything on this earth, I suggest you change your faith to someone else, Yuan suggested. To a god who will cherish it.
Yes.
I see that now. For the first time since Yuan met him, Bucket appeared to listen to him, truly listen. I will consider it, sir. Bucket sounded so crushed and lost that Yuan couldn't help but feel pity for him. Neither of them had wished for this disaster to unfold. Yuan left Bucket to his own doubts and looked for Ark. He didn't have to try too hard. Her immense chi and flawed authority acted like a torch in the night for his chi sight. He found her meditating in front of a makeshift tombstone of rifles and scrap metal. She had buried the previous gun there on her own, refusing any help to either raise the tomb or give him the sutras. Yuan suspected that this was her way to grieve.
Who was this person? Yuan asked.
The narrative has been taken without permission.
Report any sightings.
Ark turned her head away from the tomb.
A dear friend.
Yet you said nothing, Yuan accused her, his voice sharper than a blade. He couldn't keep his anger at her in check anymore.
If I had known.
I've told many gun souls the truth over the last decade, Ark said dryly. Half of them thought they would be the exception to the rule, or that they could master the gun's power for themselves. The heroes among them tried to destroy it, only to get themselves killed. I would have done neither of those things.
Truly. Ark snorted.
You came to me craving the gun's secrets, and unlike the Gatling man, you showed no wish to change your cursed path. I've seen dozens of you. There is only one of me, Yuan replied sternly. Then how do you explain this disaster? Ark waved her hand at the desolation around them, at the smoking ruins and collapsed walls riddled with holes.
You wished for it. Yuan bristled. You're wrong. Oh?
Let me remind you what you said to me before leaving for this place. Ark scoffed and threw his own words back at him. I know many bystanders will die, but the more the sects kill each other, the more it'll weaken their grip on the region. Maybe some good will come out of it one day. Yuan recoiled as if he had been slapped in the face. An unbearable weight of guilt fell upon his shoulders, crushing and overwhelming. You plan to use the techniques I taught you to solve this place's ammo shortage in the hope that its sects would wipe out each other, and they did, Ark said coldly. So answer me, what good came out of it? Yuan's hands tightened into fists. He was angry at Ark, but mostly at himself. He couldn't deny the truth of her words. He had hoped to arm the sects warring over Flesh Market, hoping they would slaughter each other, casualties be damned. Did his own actions help lure the gun to Flesh Market?
If they did.
I didn't think it would get this bad, Yuan muttered to himself. Maybe, but it's what you got, Ark replied coldly. That's the gun path for you, an endless procession of death, killing, and violence. Your gunslinger friend just became the latest link in a long chain of sorrow. Hearing about Revolver's fate made Yuan's skin crawl. His fellow gunsoul was out there roaming the wasteland, a maddened beast trapped in such a painful state of suffering that his predecessor desperately sought death to escape it. Is there any way to free him?
Yuan asked.
If the gun possesses whoever kills it.
It doesn't have to, Ark interrupted him.
A gunsoul that kills the gun comes first in the priority order, nothing more. Yuan's gunpowder blood froze in his veins. Under different circumstances, he might have become the gun. What about sealing it away, he asked. My companions and I have tried everything. We blew up the gun remotely, lured it into a fight with a caretaker spirit it couldn't possess, entombed it in a place we believed it couldn't escape. Ark shook her head. Yet it returned each and every time. Any gunsoul can become the new gun, and anyone who has ever died from a firearm can rise as one of us. The gun has plenty of vessels to choose from. A soul for a bullet, his immortal fame. The gun will never die, his boastful claim, Yuan muttered under his breath as he recalled the Bullet Church's song. He'll dance the lead dance, till no one can pull the trigger. Ark nodded, her face wearing a scowl of defeatism. So long as someone out there kills his fellow man with a firearm, the gun will never die. What is it really?
Yuan asked. The gun.
One of the demigods of ultraviolence.
Demigods. Plural.
Yuan squinted at her. How many are there? He'd assumed there had to be at least another being similar to the gun when Ark explained that nuclear cultivators worked along the same principles earlier, but her tone told him there were more than two. I don't know the exact number, Ark confessed. Each weapon family has its gun. The nuke, the blade, the bomb, the biohazard, the arson. She tilted her head to peek over her shoulder, her eyes unseen behind her blindfold. Why do you think infernals and supernatural beings ask for sacrifices? Why else would the Haito Bashara be so precious among these parts? Yuan crossed his arms and pondered the subject for a while. Because spirits get power from death?
Ark nodded sharply.
When someone is slain, their chi is released back into the world. Dedicating a victim's death to another gives that big burst of direction. Spiritual entities can harness that flow of chi and gain power from it. So that's what the gun is? An infernal associated with death by firearms.
No, Ark replied.
The gun is death by firearms. I don't see the difference. I told you that a murder victim's chi goes to whoever the sacrifice is dedicated to, Ark said. Where do you think that burst of chi goes when someone is killed, say, in a random gunfight undedicated to anyone? The pieces finally fell into place. To the weapon that killed them. Yes. That's why you hear tales of dragon-slaying blades or guns that never miss. The chi of these weapons' victims partly rubbed off on them until it gave them supernatural properties. Ark focused back on her friend's makeshift grave, and the rifle serving as its foundation. But most of that energy goes to the idea of a weapon. And eventually all that power incarnates into a spirit, like how a patch of thunderlands manifests a caretaker, Yuan muttered to himself as he finally put everything into context. A demigod of death and ultra-violence. They're the true lords of the wasteland, growing stronger with each murder no matter who calls the shots, Ark stated. They're not equals in power though. Nuclear weapons are scary, but they didn't kill all that many people across history when you tally the body count. The spear and the blade were the top dogs for a long time before fading out of prominence. The gun usurped their spot for the most part. Do each of them have their own kind of gun souls? They all have a dedicated path, but their children don't walk it the same way we do, Ark replied. I don't think they follow the same reincarnation cycle either. The gun is the only one that's passed on from gunsoul to gunsoul, as far as I know, and I've heard that the blade prefers to possess swords rather than people. Yuan's stomach sank as he pondered his mentor's words. Revolver warned him that the gun always returned to visit its gunsouls, and now he knew why. Either the gun killed its children, or they won the right to become its new host to further the cycle. A fate that would befall Yuan one day. Is there no way to break the curse? Yuan asked. Even if the gun will exist till there's nobody left to shoot at each other, it should be possible to free its victims somehow. I met a long dragon sage once, who told me that the gun curse could only be broken with a perfect shot. The right shot with the right bullet, fired with the right gun at the right place at the right time for all the right reasons. Ark snorted. I've spent the last few years trying to craft that perfect bullet. You saw how my attempts fared against the gun when I tried to save you and your friends' lives. They barely phased it. Maybe it wasn't the right shot, gun, place, time, or reason, Yuan countered. When will it be then? Ark knelt near her friend's grave. I've spent years trying to free Jim. I'm astonished he lasted that long as the gun, to be honest, and now he's gone forever. Was that why she had waited in the ammo bog for so long? Praying that she could craft the right bullet by the time the gun visited her, and that by some miracle no other gunsoul had taken up the title since? Her subdued reaction told Yuan that she considered it a fool's hope too, one that had been dashed forever today. What did that make of Yuan then? A perfect shot, the right shot with the right bullet, fired with the right gun at the right place at the right time for all the right reasons. It was cryptic as far as prophecies went, but the sight of Revolver struggling against the bloodlust overcoming him continued to haunt Yuan. His fellow gunsoul had saved his life twice, first from polio and then from the gun itself. Yuan wasn't a man to leave such debts unpaid. He refused to let one of the few men to have shown him unconditional kindness suffer forever. If there was a way to free Revolver from the gun's curse, Yuan would find it even if it delayed his quest for revenge for a time. He couldn't let an ally die on him again. The spirit train departed Flesh Market by nightfall. It was hideously overcrowded. Its wagons were meant to house a few dozen passengers at most, not 5 times that number of people with all the belongings that they could bring with them. Orient had to set aside space in the luggage, panoramic, and restaurant cars to host everyone. For his part, Yuan ended up relocating to the engine room at the train's front alongside Holster and Ark. The latter sat on a bench next to the former, who held her arm and served as a stabilizing influence for her broken bullet core. Holster managed to suppress Ark's authority back inside her body, though Yuan could tell from the sweat on his charge's forehead that it strained her to her limit. As for Yuan, he spent most of his time cycling his chi. His third coil body presented so many changes. He healed frighteningly fast for a start. His broken ribs put themselves back together in minutes, and a single chi cycling session stitched back all the wounds he sustained from his drawn-out fight with Gaiak and Gatling Man. However, it didn't heal the way a human's body should. Strong yet incredibly flexible black metal skin replaced the scar tissue that should have grown on his chest, ankle, and where he took heavy wounds. His veins had taken on a steely hue, their coils transforming into barreled conduits carrying liquid gunpowder through his body. When Yuan cycled his chi, his muscles now felt closer to intertwined triggers, pistons, and other mechanical contraptions than pieces of flesh. His wounded lungs roared like engines inside his ribcage each time he took a breath, and he always exhaled gunsmoke now. Yuan nerves had transformed into circuits that further heightened his senses. Everything felt so goddamn slow around him, like his mind processed time at a much quicker pace than most. He picked up on things he didn't before, like subtle changes in temperature and vibrations in the air. His vision had sharpened to the point he could see in the dark. He'd also noticed holes forming in the center of his palms and feet, hidden exhaust ports meant to help him with the recoil fist. Yuan was slowly transforming into a creature better suited to use the gun path's techniques. His bullet core replaced his flesh with firearm pieces the way a Borg replaced each part of his anatomy with electronic devices. Yuan knew that walking the path of the gun meant to become a human weapon, but the more he progressed on it, the less human and the more weapon he became. He couldn't pass for a scrap anymore. What would he look like once he completed the process? Yuan used to think he was transforming into something beyond humanity, if it meant gaining the power to slay the likes of Slash and Gaiak. Seeing the gun in all of its monstrous glory made him wonder. Yuan didn't care how he looked, but he wished to remain himself. He didn't want his new body to alter his mind. He didn't want to think like a gun. The wagon's door opened and Orient walked in with a food platter. The portions were small and mostly contained a mix of gruel and bread. They had started rationing due to lack of supplies. "My apologies for the dinner's delay," Orient said with creased eyes and pallid skin. Yuan knew that her human avatar was a mere projection of the train itself, but it showed all the symptoms of fatigue nonetheless. Completing the food inventory for all passengers and rationing accordingly took more time than I expected. "It's fine, Orient," Yuan reassured her while Holster hungrily grabbed a piece of bread. "We all know you're doing your best." "I fear that my best is not enough, honored passenger Yuan." Orient gave Ark a worried, stressed glance. "My infrastructure cannot support so many passengers, and Lady Ark's presence inflicts a heavy strain on me even with Miss Holster's assistance. Having her authority pushing out from within me is distressing." Ark, who had mostly kept to herself so far, let out a shrug. "I'll climb off once we reach the leyline locus. I just need a lift to ration my chi so I won't collapse and unleash my authority before I can reach it." Help support creative writers by finding and reading their stories on the original site. Holster looked up at her without a word. Ark's head tilted slightly in her direction. Could she communicate with her the same way Orient did? "No," Ark said sternly. Yuan guessed that Holster offered to serve as her anchor. "You shouldn't spend your life serving as an old ghost's crutch." Holster bit her lips, but continued to stare at Ark with insistence. It failed to move her. Orient turned to stare at Yuan, her hands joining together. She looked quite anxious. "Forgive me for interrupting your cycling session, honored guest Yuan, but may I ask you a question?" Yuan frowned. He had never heard Orient sound so stressed. "Go on." "I am a spirit train. My purpose is to carry my passengers to their chosen destination." Orient turned to stare at the door leading to the other wagons. "But these people have nowhere to go. Their home has been destroyed and no one can think of a place to seek refuge in, nor will their current supplies sustain them for long." Yuan clenched his jaw. The same thoughts had crossed his mind too. He tried to tell himself he didn't owe these refugees anything, that giving them a lift was already a pretty big favor, but he couldn't lie to himself. He had unknowingly contributed to Flesh Market's destruction by helping lure the gun to it. He couldn't just wash his hands of a mess he'd helped start. "What am I supposed to do, honored guest Yuan?" Orient asked him, pleading for directions. "Where am I supposed to go next?" Yuan tried to come up with something and came up short. The only settlement in the region large enough to possibly house these refugees would be Battletown. While they were bound to visit it anyway, everything he'd heard about the Inyong Khan suggested it would be a terrible idea. The passengers would either end up as slaves or victims. He wanted to say he had no idea yet. Yuan was never comfortable in a leadership role and usually defaulted to Mingxia's judgment back when they were a team. He simply wasn't cut out for the job. However, a look at Orient's distraught expression convinced him to think this through. She looked so lost and desperate for an answer that he didn't have the heart to leave her hanging. Yuan considered their options. Finding a safe refuge for their passengers was a relatively long-term priority. Keeping them alive in the short term would require both supplies and space. An idea crossed Yuan's mind. "Can you grow longer, Orient? Gain more wagons?" She frowned at him. "I cannot create new cars, but I can assimilate existing ones." "Is there any place where we can salvage those then, alongside supplies?" Yuan asked. "Maybe at one of those stations where you usually stop by?" "Yes, I think so." The fact Yuan had a plan in mind reassured and energized Orient. One should be on the way to Battletown. Now that Lady Ark no longer obstructs the ley line, I can make a stop there. "Then let's do so," Yuan decided. "It will take time to find a refuge where we can drop off our new passengers, so we'd be better off adapting your facilities to house more people until we can figure things out. Maybe equip you with weapons to ward off marauders." "You should drop me off behind you once you reach the ley line focus," Ark said. "I'll stay there and stabilize my authority again." I can't let Revolver suffer forever, Yuan replied. There has to be a way to land your perfect shot and free him, and you're going to help me. I will abide by our agreement to teach you my techniques, but I cannot leave the ley line without causing my authority to go haywire, Ark warned him, ignoring the insistent look Holster sent her. And I refuse to use a human pillar.
I ain't a fiend.
Yuan crossed his arms and pondered the problem. This presented quite the issue. They would have to stay on the move to find supplies, and the spirit train couldn't exactly run back and forth for him to attend Ark's lessons. Though he felt he owed the refugees his help, killing Slash, freeing Revolver from the gun, and fulfilling his oath to Ark to hunt down Manhattan remained his priorities for now. Orient noticed his concern and then clapped her hands. May I suggest an alternative? Ark tilted her head in her direction, suddenly curious. An alternative? Honored passenger Yuan's wise suggestion gave me an idea, Orient said. I suspect Miss Holster and I could reshape one of my cars to serve as a special barrier that would stabilize Lady Ark's authority. Yuan raised an eyebrow. Is that even possible? You won't survive it, Spirit, Ark replied. You said it yourself. Holding me strains you enough as it is, even with the girl's assistance. Because none of my infrastructure is designed to hold you, Orient replied confidently. With the correct feng shui arrangement and sutra scripts, I believe I could design a car that would serve as your bullet core's anchor. It would diminish my speed, since I would need to fuel its barrier with chi from the ley line I use to travel, and you will be forced to stay within its confines so as not to endanger my body's integrity or the other passengers. But you could transport her around, Yuan said, his body shivering with enthusiasm. This would neatly solve their problems all at once. Ark shrugged with skepticism, though she didn't close the door on the proposal. I don't care whether I stay put in one place or if you carry me around in a box, she said. If you succeed, then sure, I'll go along.
Then we have a plan, Yuan decided.
We'll drop you off at the ley line focus for a time, visit the station, and see what we can salvage from there. They would figure out what to do with their passengers afterwards. Ark looked ready to collapse from exhaustion by the time they dropped her off. Yuan half expected her old valley's landscape to return to normal after her temporary departure, but Ark's chi had partly rubbed off on it. Though it showed nothing obviously supernatural like rifle trees or gunpowder rivers, the valley's ground was saturated with lead and the local blasted trees boasted sheets of steel for bark. Ark had left her mark for years to come. Once they reached the valley center, Ark fully unleashed Headshot Forge once again. The landscape shifted back into a desolate bog of rifle trees and gunpowder ponds in an instant, like a house welcoming its owner home.
Are you well?
Yuan asked Ark after helping her sit on a forged ammo chair. He had been careful to carry her alone away from the spirit train until Orient and the others were well beyond her authority's reach. Bit tired, his mentor grunted back. Never left this place for so long in 4 years. Yuan could see why after spending the last few hours in her company. Ark's broken core leaked out more chi in a minute than he could cycle in a day. Holster's assistance barely helped contain the leak. Don't tell me you're worried? Ark scoffed at Yuan's concern.
I'm fine.
Sure, Yuan replied. He knew better, but he could tell his mentor hated looking weak in the eyes of others. What will you do until we return? Keep making bullets, I suppose. Except now I'll try to land that perfect shot for your friend's sake rather than mine. Her response drew a chuckle from Yuan, much to her curiosity. What's so funny? You sound so pessimistic, Yuan said. But many would have given up by now. I made my bed long ago while I was still a fool, and I'll die in it. Ark shrugged and rested in her chair. Keep cycling until your body fully adapts to your third coil's chi output. You aren't even halfway through your metamorphosis. Yuan frowned at this news. His body already boasted more metal than flesh beneath his skin. Should he expect to gain gun wings too? What will I look like by the end of it? He asked, though he already knew the answer, inhuman. It's different for all of us, depending on the shape of our soul and how we approach our chosen path, Ark replied. After a while, your body will have changed enough to host an innate technique. We'll figure out which one to teach you once you reach that stage.
Yuan scowled.
Then I will have to commit to the gun path.
Yes.
Ark grabbed a bullet off the ground and thoughtfully studied it. Transitioning from the third to the fourth is the point of no return. You have to engrave the gun path into your very soul. Going deep means closing off other options, till you can't turn back anymore. Reaching the fourth coil meant choosing the gun path. Yuan wouldn't have hesitated not too long ago, back when he believed becoming a gun soul was a blessing rather than a curse in disguise. Though he never asked to follow the path, it had seemed tailor-made for him. Seeing his soul's true shape reflected in the moonlight only solidified his belief. However, that was before he encountered the gun. He had witnessed what fate awaited him at the end of his path, what incarnation of murder and senseless slaughter he could turn into. And it gave him pause. Ark detected his confusion and pounced on it. You should switch out to another path while you can, she said. Take the Moonlight Sect's offer or something. Their path is pretty chill, all things considered, and their Wayfinder can grant you your half-life back. Yuan cleared his throat, his heart wavering with hesitation.
I'll think about it.
The story has been illicitly taken. Should you find it on Amazon, report the infringement. As much as he feared becoming the new gun, Yuan despised sex with every fiber of his being, a hatred which the flesh market sect war only reinforced. Joining the Black Moon's folk felt like selling out to the people who had looked down on him all his life. Was there another path open to him that wouldn't involve betraying his principles? A road he could walk with his head held high. Ark remained silent for a moment, then dismissed him. Come back if you've decided to damn yourself and dance in the bullet hell.
Otherwise, I've done all I can.
I'll still hold you to your end of the vow though. Yuan had expected as much. He would fulfill that promise, whichever path he settled on. Yuan struggled to cycle his qi all night long. He did everything right. He sat in deep meditation in the engine room, where the spirit train's qi concentration was at its apex. He focused on nourishing the steel slowly overtaking his organic parts, reinforced his organs, and practiced his sutras to sharpen his concentration. However, Yuan struggled to absorb any more qi than he did the previous day. Nay, he cycled slower than when he was a mere second coil. His body struggled to properly absorb anything. Yuan felt like he was back in the days when he caught a lung disease in his youth and struggled with each breath. After wasting hours hardly making any progress, Yuan decided to change his routine. He opened his eyes to find Holster sleeping soundly on the blanket next to him with a scribbled piece of paper in her hands. Orient sat nearby and scratched her hair lightly, the moonlight shining outside the closed windows in a pitch-black sky. Do you struggle with your meditation, honored guest Yuan?
Orient asked.
You seemed frustrated. That's one way to put it, Yuan muttered to himself as he peeked out beyond the glass. A dry expanse filled with sulfur pits spewing yellow smoke into the air slowly phased out the Fleshmancer's fields of white flowers. No plants could take root here. I'm straying.
Straying?
Orient asked with a hint of concern. From what?
My path.
Buried emotions and fears formed emotional debris slowing down one's flow of qi. Yuan burned his old issues away under the cold moonlight, only for his newfound hesitation to clog his circuits again. Doubting his own path had thrown him out of tune with it. Is this about what happened to your fellow gun soul? Orient asked softly. Yuan's brows furrowed slightly.
You knew.
I am a spirit, honored guest Yuan. I sensed that gun demon possessing him before he departed. Orient joined her hands together. You are afraid of ending up like him. Yes, Yuan replied bluntly. A gunsoul's fate is to either die by the gun's hands or become the new gun. I know that now. Unless you change your path while you still can, Orient guessed. Why not accept the Moonlight Sect's offer then? I recall that they offered to take you in. Because how to say this? Yuan pondered how to explain it to Orient in terms that she would relate to. The gun path fits me like a glove, and I hate sections. It's like I had an idea of my final destination, but now I wonder if it's the right one for me midway through and I don't like any other stop. Does that make sense? It does, Orient replied with genuine compassion. She had suffered from a similar hesitation not too long ago. It is an awful feeling, not knowing where to go. Perhaps a good night of sleep would help clear your mind? Dreams do seem to silence my passengers' fears. I don't think I need to sleep anymore, or even if I can. Yuan hadn't felt the call of dreams for a while. His third coil body didn't feel tired at all. Can you sleep, Orient? A spirit can close their eyes, honored guest Yuan, but the door to sleep remains shut to us, she replied while glancing at Holster with a kind smile. What awaits humans beyond the veil remains a mystery to me. I would like to cross it someday though. I always assumed a dream would be a pleasant place. That's not always the case, Yuan replied, the moonlight filling him with a morose mood. I used to have nightmares at her age.
Oh?
Is that unusual for humans? Orient seemed genuinely curious. I do not recall you suffering from those during your stay inside my walls. The innocent phrasing slightly amused Yuan. Nightmares come and go, he replied. I think I've grown so numb to loss that they stopped haunting me.
I see.
Orient glanced at Holster. I have never seen Miss Holster suffer in her sleep. She always dreams peacefully in our company. That surprised Yuan. He would have expected Holster to suffer from night terrors after everything she went through. Did his and Orient's presence reassure her that much? Not that he would prefer to hear her scream at night. What did she draw? Yuan asked as he checked the piece of paper in Holster's hands. It resembled a poor, messy sketch of two wagons, one shaped more like a temple than anything functional and the other with furniture arranged into a bagua array. Are those your plans for the new wagons? Miss Holster had fun drawing them, Orient replied with a small chuckle. The second car is meant for you.
For me.
Yuan studied the design and quickly figured out its purpose. The feng shui's interior arrangement focuses qi at its center. Miss Holster thinks it will improve your cultivation. Orient gently caressed their charge's hair with motherly affection. She believes in you more than you believe in yourself, honored guest Yuan. Yuan didn't know what to make of that. His bullet core surged with a mix of pride, affection, and shame. Even after the flesh market disaster, even after seeing the gun and what its bloody path promised, Holster still thought Yuan would pull through somehow. He wanted to live up to her expectations. And he would do anything in his power to do so. Greenery surrounded the station, its emerald grass glittering under the sunlight. Yuan struggled to believe in his own eyes. Unlike Bucket and the other spotters, who all used binoculars to observe the place from afar from the wagon's roof, his new eyes let him see far into the distance without assistance. The train station looked quite similar to the one Yuan encountered in the Thunderlands, a forgotten multi-floor ruin of cracked walls and broken windows. This one, however, was covered in creeping vines and vibrant leaves rather than rust. Yuan had never seen anything like it outside of a sex compound. That alone would have been astonishing, but the area around the station raised all kinds of alarm bells. First of all, other buildings flanked the half-buried railway alongside tall trees with twisted black bark and whose branches held pale fruits that radiated with a yellow glow. Abandoned wagons and railroad cars wrapped in moss littered the ground. A vast field of grass and blooming wildflowers surrounded them, their fragrance so overwhelming that Yuan could smell it from a wide distance. The station was enveloped in quite a lot of qi too. Not as much as a patch of Thunderlands or Ark's authority, but enough to rival a sex compound.
I don't see any fence, sir, Bucket warned.
A barrier surrounds the station, Yuan replied. He could see the faint flow of qi being redirected around the flower field into a bagua formation. Either the flowers themselves served as its foundations, or they simply grew over lines dug into the earth below them. This place is dangerous. Unguarded greenery in the middle of the wasteland was either a trap for the unwary, or a very powerful entity's property. Yuan doubted it was a sect compound, since its owners would have restored the buildings and put up signs to announce their allegiance. The station probably belonged to a lonely cultivator of considerable power or a spirit. Yuan scanned the area for more details until he noticed a strange occurrence. A big statue of a spotted cat wearing a cap nearly identical to Orient's own stood in front of the station entrance behind a set of crimson torii gates. Its bronze body remained unblemished by the growing vegetation and it radiated no small amount of qi. Yuan focused on it with his sharpened senses, reading its fluctuations until he could identify its nature. The Stoneskin sect kept cats to deal with vermin raiding their granaries, so he immediately recognized their peculiar smell in the air. The ambient qi carried many other peculiar signs: the taste of fresh meat on the tongue, the scent of soothing tea, and the welcoming aura of a safe place. The first bothered Yuan, but he detected neither blood nor malevolence in the air either.
Strange. A place of abundance dedicated to a cat. Maneki Nico, Yuan muttered.
I think that this place is a Maneki Nico's den.
A Maneki Nico?
Bucket and his fellow spotters immediately rejoiced at the news. This is good news. Will the spirit offer us sanctuary? If we don't abuse its generosity, Yuan replied. He had only encountered one of these benevolent cat spirits in his lifetime, when it gave his team shelter on the condition that they would leave at dawn. He had been so kind and polite, even when he warned Jawlong that he would turn him into a coin if he dared rub their host's belly. It's not alone either. Yuan sensed another presence within the station, one that smelled of bloodless flesh. At least it didn't seem hostile. A malevolent entity would have quickly corrupted the Maneki Nico's den by now. Sir, Bucket warned, his goggles pointing south.
Trouble.
Yuan glanced away from the station and quickly noticed a set of shadows observing the spirit train from atop a blasted hill. He mistook them for two men on motorcycles at first, until he noticed their plastic hands and faceless mannequin faces. The scouts immediately retreated behind the hill before Yuan could shoot either of them.
Plastic men, Yuan said, his jaw clenching.
He wasn't looking forward to dealing with those vermin. The scavengers couldn't keep their hands off anything reeking of oil, which they processed to build more of their own kind, and some of them could even cultivate. How many weapons do we have? That's the one thing we don't lack, sir, Bucket replied. You think they'll attack soon? Not immediately, but it's likely. The spirit train was too tempting a prize for them, but also too well defended for a small warband to take. Those plastic men would either come back with larger numbers or not at all. Tell everyone who can fight to take positions near the windows. About that, sir, Bucket said. We loaded up a few small artillery cannons inside Lady Orient's wagons when we left Fleshmarket. We could mount them on the roofs. It would help, Yuan conceded. If Orient allows it. I do, his friend's voice echoed from the wagon beneath their feet, startling everyone. Orient's laugh resonated across the spirit train's length. Did you forget that you were standing atop my back? Honestly, yeah, Yuan replied. He was so used to communicating with her human avatar that he forgot she could see, hear, and speak through any of her wagons. Any opinion on this place? All stations are safe havens for my kind, Orient replied. This one beckons us with open arms. Stolen novel, please report. The barrier says otherwise. The barrier will let us through, honored guest Yuan, Orient said calmly. Lady Tama welcomes all trains and their passengers. Lady Tama? You mean the Maneki Nico? Yuan raised an eyebrow. You know her? No, Orient replied with a metallic giggle. But she knows me. Yuan pondered what she meant, but trusted Orient enough not to doubt her judgment. She hadn't hesitated to ram herself into the gun to save his life, even though she knew she stood no chance against a demigod of ultra-violence. He knew she had his back. It's a happy feeling, Yuan thought as Bucket and the others retreated inside the wagons through a trapdoor in the ceiling. Orient manifested them at his request to help the spotters move around. Complete mutual trust. He had only experienced it with his old team, then Holster and Orient. It was a breath of fresh air after so many years of keeping his guard up around people for fear of betrayal or ambush. Relaxing even. He wanted to protect Orient and Holster so they could feel safe around him too. The spirit train ended its pause and drove towards the station, phantom tracks manifesting over the buried railways and overlaying with them. The vehicle moved past the barrier without any issue. The very flowers that kept it up moved around to let them pass. As a wave of wood chi washed over him, Yuan quickly realized why this place allowed vegetation to prosper in the middle of an arid wasteland. It worked on a similar principle to item materialization, focusing on containing specific energies while excluding others in order to purify and maximize their concentration. Yuan wondered if he could replicate a similar method inside Orient's wagons. Since Holster believed they could create focus rooms capable of concentrating chi in an area, it should be easy to build greenhouses to grow food for passengers. The spirit train quietly stopped in front of the station and its cat statue. Yuan climbed down from the roof right in time for hundreds of eyes to stare at him from the building's windows and the tree's branches. Cats. A large crowd of small, utterly normal cats walked out of the station to observe the spirit train. Their leader soon materialized from the very statue bearing her likeness. The bronze statue then leaped off its pedestal before transforming into a being of flesh and fur, her jade eyes greeting Yuan with a friendly wink. The Maneki Nico was quite the strange creature to look at. Her spotted fur was a palette of sandy brown, black, and white. The cap on her head was nearly identical to that of Orient's, albeit with the emblem bearing different words written in a script Yuan could not comprehend. A beaded necklace hung around her neck, its medallion bearing a strange inscription, Kishi Eki. The spirit's power was less than a shadow of the gun's overwhelming strength, but she was deceptively mighty nonetheless. Her feminine, kind aura reminded Yuan of Orient. Welcome, welcome, Orient Junction TR-61. She said with a voice that was both old and strangely childish. Honorable Eternal Station Master Tama Damujin, caretaker spirit of train stations, bides you, your crew, and your passengers an excellent day. Eternal Station Master? Is that a cultivation sect rank of some kind? Her greeting surprised Yuan. He used to think only Thunderlands could manifest caretaker spirits, but Orient's earlier manifestation already disabused him of that notion. She must be a kind soul to create such a peaceful place. I best show her respect. Greetings, Honorable Eternal Station Master Tama, Yuan replied with a deep bow. I am Yuan Guang, a passenger on this spirit train. I humbly ask for your hospitality. Of course, you are most welcome. The Maneki Nico purred with happiness, her body radiating a peaceful and relaxing smell. Come out, come out. The door to the engine opened, with Orient and Holster stepping out together to greet their host with bright wide smiles. Yuan's eyes widened in shock.
Orient, had stepped off from the train. How is this possible? Yuan muttered under his breath, his shock suddenly replaced with concern. Are you well, Orient? Thank you for your concern, honored guest Yuan, but I am fine, Orient replied before bowing in front of the Maneki Nico. It is an honor to meet you once again, Lady Tama, and you have my deepest gratitude for inviting my spirit to wander inside your abode. You are welcome, Orient Junction TR61, Tama replied with a purring chuckle. Every train may share my home. I am surprised you would remember my name after all these years, Orient replied. A group of passengers led by Bucket climbed off the train behind her, now that they figured they wouldn't suffer an ambush. I was worried that you would misremember me. We last met when the world was a much larger place. I never forget a train, never. Lady Tama nodded to herself. I'm so glad you became a spirit too. So smart and so strong too. So very elegant. Orient giggled. You are too kind, Lady Tama. Yuan noticed that the other cats had found the courage to greet Orient's passengers. Holster stared at them with a mix of childish wonder and apprehension. It was probably her first time seeing a feline in the flesh. Her fear didn't last long. A brave spotted cat quickly rubbed its fur against her leg, which encouraged Holster to pet it in return. Her adorable smile warmed Yuan's heart. The zealous glint in Bucket's eyes, not so much. The strange man's glance switched from Orient to Tama back and forth, his hands trembling with what Yuan identified as religious enthusiasm. Those were the same looks he used to make at Gunsoul's. Yuan had a bad feeling about this. How many stations do you watch over, Honorable Lady Tama? Yuan asked out of curiosity. She hadn't manifested in the Thunderlands nor near Ark's authority, so he wondered how far her reach extended. All those bearing my image. The cat spirit hummed a strange tune to herself, her face the very picture of happiness. I was just a regular cat once, super station master at Kishi Station. Then I died and humans raised me to godhood with treats and prayers, until one day the spiral danced and let me meow back. 100 stations I watch over now, yes. So Eternal Station Master was indeed a sect rank. It must have once been an extremely powerful organization for one of their pet cats to become a caretaker spirit capable of protecting multiple places at once. Morty. Tama called out to the station. Come out. We have visitors. I have heard, a deep, powerful voice answered from within the building. Make yourself at home, travelers. A monster lumbered out of the station. Yuan immediately adopted a fighting stance the moment it came into view. The beast was a rolling hill of mauve skin, fat, and brawn assembled in a shape that resembled a mix between a toad and an obese man, all while wrapped in an ornate golden cloak. His flesh gleamed with chi that smelled of both filth and freshly butchered meat, while his face stretched into traits that reminded Yuan of a bat with crimson eyes. It was his pendant that caught Yuan's eyes, however, and caused more than a few people to draw their weapons. Its golden medallion bore the infamous emblem of a pair of jaws eating the earth. The monster showed no fear or tension. In fact, he greeted them with a genial smile full of sharp teeth. I am Mordigin, he introduced himself. A humble sin-eater cultivator, and your host for the day. One of the Skybiter's followers stood before them. Among the 1,000 paths, none were as reviled as the Skybiters. When the spiral dancer awakened mankind to the secrets and wonders of cultivation, she showed them all the way, but not all paths were as kind as her own. Some were paved with pain and blood. Few of the people who had witnessed the unmaking lingered among the living, but their tales of terror survive to this day, stories of great teeth spanning the length of the sky and closing upon mountains to drink the oceans and swallow continents. A single bit that unmade the world. The Skybiter's table scraps still orbited around the planet as spinning rings of stone and ice. The fanged coast itself earned its name because one look at the map showed the outline of an immense tooth. Obviously, his followers inspired loathing in the wasteland that their wayfinder had created. No respectable settlement would tolerate a sin-eater cultivator among them, and most lynched them on sight. They were a miserable lot forced to hide in the most forgotten corners of the earth. Yuan's hand had grabbed his revolver the moment his eyes identified the sect's symbol. Lady Tama's cap immediately covered his barrel before he could shoot the sin-eater in the head. No violence, no. Lady Tama stomped the ground with a hiss that rippled through the air. No. An earthquake shook the entire station, its walls creaking and its ground trembling beneath Yuan's feet. A few of his armed followers collapsed and tripped behind him, though his aim remained steady. Peace, the so-called Mordigin said, his palm raised in appeasement. I have no quarrel with you and seek none. Yuan didn't believe him, but Orient's soft hand gently touched his arm and lowered it.
Lady Tama would never allow a troublemaker inside her station. Meow, that's right? Lady Tama nodded furiously. Morty is a good guest, who feeds cats and men alike. Show them Morty. As you wish, the Sin Eater replied. His nails extended into black claws sharper than knives, which he pressed against his neckline. Then he gutted himself all the way to the navel in one swift stroke. Holster let out a startled cry of surprise, which a few other refugees echoed. Yuan himself took a step back at this sudden and unexpected turn of events. He awaited the torrent of blood and bile that would inevitably spill out of the Sin Eater cultivator's stomach with apprehension. Yuan would never have expected sausages. Fresh meat poured out of Mordigen's cut in a rolling red mass. Sausages, kidneys, meatballs, and entrails too numerous for the man's body to contain soon piled up on the ground in a veritable crimson feast. While Yuan recoiled in disgust, a sentiment shared by many, Tama's crowd of cats hurriedly grabbed the pieces of meat for themselves. By the time Mordigen seemingly ran out of food, a pile of flesh nearly as tall as himself stood in front of his obese gut. His skin stitched itself together in an instant. This is my flesh, and these fruits my labor, Mordigen declared as he grabbed a shining fruit from one of the trees and presented it to Yuan. Feast as much as you would like. Experience had taught Yuan that there was no such a thing as a free lunch in the unmade world, and hence he looked at the fruit with suspicion. Was it poisoned? Cursed? Or did the Sin Eater expect a favor in return for his hospitality? Yuan felt many eyes on himself, mostly from behind. Everyone waited for his reaction, which would likely determine how their entire stop at this strange station would unfold. He could cut the tension in the air with a knife. His allies would defer to his judgment, and it made him uneasy. Yuan hated being thrust into a leadership role, especially with 100 lives on the line, and now that he doubted his own path. He had no idea how to proceed. What would Mingxia do in his situation? Yuan knew his old friend never reached a decision without gathering all the information she could obtain first. It helped her project an image of intelligence and thoughtfulness that reassured everyone else. I should follow her example. Yuan decided to play it safe, first scanning the fruit with his chi sight. It looked like a green sphere glowing with chi and relatively ordinary otherwise. Yuan didn't detect any malevolence or hidden corruption within the gift. Quite the contrary, he had never seen food with such immaculate purity in all the wasteland. This is a spirit fruit charged with wood chi, Yuan said. I cultivate spirit herbs, roots and fruits, Mordigen confirmed. You and your human pillar companion will benefit the most from them. Your fellow men shall find them nourishing too. Each of them is worth a full course meal. Yuan couldn't believe his ears. You would just give them away to strangers? I do not consume them, for I feed on the sins of our few visitors, and good deeds spin karmas wheel the right way. Mordigen shrugged his massive shoulders. Those who seek to shed their bad karma are welcome to feast with me inside. I shall purify them. This narrative has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. If you see it on Amazon, please report it. Yuan squinted at him with skepticism. While most settlements refused to allow Sin Eaters among them, he had heard rumors that a few of them welcomed them in secret because of their path's unique technique. Namely, they could consume the sins and bad karma of another, allowing even the most hopeless of ruffians a shot at a better reincarnation or to purify a corrupted spirit. That's how it works. Yuan studied Mordigen head to toe. His monstrous appearance was most likely the result of countless sins that he had accumulated from his clients. Since he takes others' bad karma upon himself, he must constantly act charitably to compensate. His generosity served a tangible end. Yuan could trust that kind of self-interest. Thank you, Honorable Mordigen, Yuan said graciously after accepting the gift. He felt the tension lessen the moment he seized the fruit within his palm. After all, if the only powerful cultivator on the spirit train convoy didn't show concern, then why should Scraps? Your generosity honors you. Yuan could only hope that his choice hadn't doomed his fellow survivors. If that Sin Eater did anything suspicious, he wouldn't hesitate to strike first and ask questions later. You are welcome to take as many fruits as you wish, along with their seeds should you desire to plant more yourself, Mordigen replied. His genial smile somehow managed to make his horrible face seem non-threatening. Please be mindful not to take more than what you need for the sake of future travelers in peril. They too may require help. We shall not abuse your or honored eternal station master Tama's trust, Orient added politely. May we also require your help with another matter? If it is not too much of a bother. Of course. Lady Tama agreed happily, without even asking for details first. What do you need? As you can see, I carry too many passengers for my current capacity, which inflicts undue stress on them. Orient's grace and poise reminded Yuan of Mingxia in so many ways. And I see that you have many in used cars. Would you mind if I borrowed a few? Lady Tama kindly accepted her request. Take as many as you want. A spirit train of your power could host a greenhouse on its rails, Mordigin said after stroking his oily chin. I would suggest that you take a few of my spirit trees with you to feed your passengers. I would gladly teach you how to cultivate them, should you require guidance.
A greenhouse.
Orient clapped her hands with enthusiasm. That would be wonderful.
It would, Yuan conceded.
Being able to produce their own food would help feed their passengers, though he had no idea how long and how much effort it would take to produce spirit fruits. The Stoneskin sect often spent years perfecting them. Work will wait. Lady Tama declared, her will utterly unshakable. Let me give you a tour.
Yes, a full tour.
With pleasure, Lady Tama, Orient replied while flashing Yuan a telling glance. It would be polite for them to entertain their Maneki Nico host for now. It will be such a delight. With their safety ensured, the spirit train's passengers flowed out of its wagons to enjoy a well-deserved rest. The most starved of the lot even dared to take from the sausages and other meats Mordigin so disgustingly offered them. Most simply followed Orient as Lady Tama excitedly beckoned her inside the station to visit its rooms. Yuan encouraged Holster to follow after them, which he did with a spotted cat following her closely. Will you indulge my curiosity for a moment, Gunsol?
Mordigin asked him.
It is the first time I have met one of you in decades, and you reek of guilt. Yuan's hands clenched into fists. Is that a veiled threat of some kind?
No, of course not.
The Sin Eater's crimson eyes betrayed his wariness. You do not trust my intentions. You believe I am deceiving you, or Lady Tama. I assure you, I seek no trouble with you nor those under her protection. I doubt that, Yuan replied flatly. Your kind has a well-deserved reputation for destruction.
Awful, yes. Well-deserved?
I must disagree. Mordigin shook his head with a heavy sigh. Our wayfinder does not deserve your scorn. Lord Ko was the bravest, purest man which I have ever encountered. A noble soul the likes of which only come once in a century.
Lord Ko?
Is that the Skybiter's true name? Yuan immediately caught on the man's peculiar wording. You say you've encountered him? To his utter shock, Mordigin answered with a sharp nod. I was there when the spiral dancer danced the world anew, and when Lord Ko ate its sins. But that would make you not so old, Mordigin replied with a bellowing laugh. Many of our people could live over a century without cultivating. Very few remember those days. Not many of us survived half a century of various ascensions, let alone with their wits and minds intact. The more ancient a mind, the more it struggles to adapt to a new reality. Yuan crossed his arms. The Sin Eater spoke with such confidence about such an unbelievable boast that he was either telling the truth or was the best liar he had ever encountered. I struggle to believe you. What reason would I have to lie?
Plenty.
You could be trying to impress me or to excuse your wayfinder's crimes. Yuan considered the matter before thinking of a good test for the cultivator's knowledge. What do you know about the cube of Natho? Do you mean the cube of NATO? To Yuan's surprise, Mordigin appeared to recognize the object's name. I haven't heard of this artifact since the unmaking. How did you learn of its existence? Yuan clenched his jaw and wisely decided not to give too many details. I carried it around.
The real cube? It was found.
Mordigin's face twisted into a grimace. This world would have been a safer place had it remained lost. Do you still have it? No, and I don't know where it is, Yuan lied through his teeth. He knew better than to tell a cultivator about its current location. This would spare him messy complications. A nuclear cultivator is looking for it though. I'm trying to find out why. Mordigin scowled grimly. I would search for it relentlessly too if it was my god sealed inside it. He spoke those dreadful words so casually that it took Yuan's mind a few seconds to register their significance. A shiver traveled down his spine soon after. Encountering Manhattan had given him a glimpse of what lay behind the curtain, only for Mordigin to rip it out and show him the ugly truth it hid, information equally disturbing and frightening in equal measure.
Come again.
Yuan asked softly.
The nuke.
The demigod of atomic annihilation and nuclear weapons. The Western Alliance trapped its avatar inside the cube over 40.5 years back. Mordigin marked a short, heavy pause in between his sentences. You truly didn't know. Yuan held the Sin Eater's gaze for a while, then took a deep gunsmoke breath. Tell me everything. It is a very long story, so you will not mind if we discuss it over some spirit leaf tea? Mordigin took his silence for a yes. He clapped Yuan on the back, then invited him inside a building near the railway. It all begins with the end of the world. Yuan and Mordigin discussed the apocalypse over a cup of spirit leaf tea. Though he had seen cultivators partake in the practice in the past, Yuan had never been allowed to participate himself. Qi-charged nutrients were too rare and precious to be wasted on scraps. Now that he could test it, Yuan found himself supremely unimpressed. The beverage tasted terribly bitter, and while it carried more qi than usual food rations, he could easily gather as much from training near a ley line. My sincere apologies for the taste, Mordigin said as he poured himself a cup with an ancient jade teapot. I focused on cultivating wood-aligned spirit leaves, which is of little benefit to those blessed by the metal sign like yourself. I myself was born under the auspices of the Een Wood Pig. Do you believe in the zodiac? Yuan asked as he looked at the hole to his left. Mordigin had made his lair on the second floor of a ruined pagoda with a crumbled wall exposed to the garden below them. It offered quite a splendid view of the wasteland. It always sounded so vague to me. Never put much faith in it. I see the zodiac like I see the wind, Mordigin replied while sitting on a dusty old cushion. The old cultivator lived modestly, with deceptively strong cobwebs keeping the cracked ceiling from falling apart. Yuan didn't see any furniture besides the tea table, rare scroll shelves, and a few ceramic vases. It pushes us in a direction, but hardly enough to throw us onto a specific course. It is merely one influence among countless others. Strong enough for us to notice, too weak for us to care too much about? Yuan glanced at the grass-covered rails below and the rusted wagons resting upon them. Lady Tama showcased a few of them to Orient's group, with the spirit train's caretaker examining each of them closely. Yuan guessed she was considering which ones she would incorporate into herself. Were there more trains and railways during the Lost Age? Thousands, with routes that circled the whole of Earth, Mordigin said. Men created so many technological wonders. Vehicles that could fly from one side of the world to the other in a day's time, machines that could run 1,000 tasks at once, even rockets that allowed us to go to the moon. You're making this up, Yuan replied in disbelief. They would have burned. The moonlight wasn't yet the radiance that burns away falsehood, Mordigin replied while sipping his tea. Unlike Yuan, he seemed to enjoy the taste. Moonburns would have been a boon during those times. Youngsters call this era the Lost Age, but the Age of Decay would be more appropriate. Nations went to war all the time, poverty ran rampant, Megacore plundered nature's resources until the seas turned poisonous and the earth drowned in trash. Megacore? Yuan asked, the word unknown to him. Are those demons of some kind? His question appeared to amuse Mordigin. You could say that. They too were evils born of human greed. Many sects follow in their footsteps to this day, seeking to commodify human suffering. He shook his head in annoyance. Our people had lost their way back then. Our minds were clouded with such filth that we blinded ourselves to the Tao. The men of that time worshipped money, fame, and power rather than virtue and potential. Yuan had heard those stories. Until the Thunder Dance. Until the Spiral Dancer, Mordigin confirmed. I never met her before the Thunder Dance, though I'd heard much about her. She was a holy woman from an eastern land, a mystic of immense spiritual power and knowledge. Many called her the last bodhisattva, who achieved enlightenment and yet decided to remain in this world to guide mankind to salvation. What's a bodhisattva? Yuan asked. He didn't know the term. A spiritual rank in a religion long forgotten. Their principles weren't so far off from today's cultivation rites. Mordigin stroked his enormous gut. Most importantly, this marked her as a regressor of considerable power and wisdom. A regressor? Yuan had heard the term. Aren't they people aware of their past lives? Indeed they are, Mordigin explained. The Spiral Dancer wasn't the first of us to awaken her core through meditation in human history, but she was the only one to succeed in the modern age, and the first person in history to ascend through the 7 coils of infinity and join with the Tao. Mordigin looked up at the vibrant sun and the golden clouds outside. For a moment he seemed gone. His body anchored in the present moment, while his mind wandered past the veil of time to a past long gone. You should have seen her dance, he said, his eyes shining. It was such a surreal yet entrancing sight. Every step thundered forth lightning from the sky, and every movement was a wave unraveling illusions and falsehoods that blinded us humans to the way. She was a spark among men, a bolt that shocked the world awake. I watched her ascend a spiral staircase of shooting stars until she became one with the sky. His words carried such vibrant awe that Yuan could almost hear lightning crackle in the background. He imagined a Thunderland's veil covering the world in an instant, bringing forth spirits, demons, and the wonders of cultivation to all. How did it go wrong? Yuan whispered, his attention turning towards the ruins of the lost age surrounding him. How did it come to this? The spiral dancer had hoped to jolt mankind out of its self-inflicted spiritual decay and force them to look up to a brighter future, Mordigin replied after focusing back on his tea. He looked at his own monstrous reflection in the beverage with sorrow. Unfortunately, she was mistaken. A world drowning in sin and filth could only birth monsters. Yuan quickly guessed what happened. That's when they appeared, wasn't it? The demigods of ultraviolence. Them and countless other terrors. Mordigin shook his head. The megacore were transformed into self-aware spirits of industrialized greed, demanding worship and stripping the earth of its resources. More incorporated, dynamis, dismaker labs, voracious evil things, all of them. So many saw cultivation as a ticket to power and glory rather than the path to enlightenment, and the nations of the world tethered on the brink of a war that could have destroyed us all. And no one tried to take a stand? Yuan wouldn't put it past cultivators to try to seize power for themselves, but no sect would let their own world be destroyed. The spiral dancer inspired many heroes and peace-bringers, but what can a few flickering lights of hope do against such an endless tide of greed and sorrow? Mordigin finished his cup. Chaos reigned for 5 years until Lord Ko's ascension purified the world. Love this story? Find the genuine version on the author's preferred platform and support their work. Yuan didn't buy his excuse. You mean when he destroyed it? Mordigin stroked his oily chin. Say you are a doctor, Gunsol, and a patient comes to you with legs infected by gangrene. If nothing is done, the rot will spread and the person will die. Would you cut off both of your patient's legs to save their life, even knowing that they will never walk again? Your master bit off a lot more than 2 legs, Yuan countered. And yet, they had to be removed to save mankind. Was that the best outcome? No, I do not think so. Was it necessary? I'm afraid it was. Mordigin glanced down at the group following Lady Tama, singling out Holster among them. Did you know that Lord Ko was around your Haito Bashira's age when he began to cultivate, right after the Thunder Dance? Those words took Yuan aback. The same age as Holster? He could hardly believe it. But if so, he can't have ascended at such a young age. Age means little in the grand scheme of things, Mordigin replied. It does not necessarily teach us wisdom, as many believe. That is born of experience, which Lord Ko had plenty of in his short life. Yuan struggled to imagine a boy of Holster's age reaching the Tao so early, but then again, his charge had shown great aptitude in the arts of feng shui and sutras. A knowledge that had been forced upon her by the cruelties of the wasteland. What? Yuan cleared his throat and then found himself staring at his reflection in the tea. What was he like? This Lord Ko. He was an orphan in a war-torn land whose name will mean little to you. A child with a great heart and strange powers. He did not understand himself. He could eat the ills of his fellowman, which in turn granted him insight into the human condition. Mordigin's eyes brimmed with immense sadness, the kind which Yuan believed to be entirely sincere, raw, and true. Every day, he would tend to the poor and the needy, absolving sinners and taking their pain upon himself. You admire him, Yuan realized. You worshipped him, even back then. Even before he ascended. I did. Mordigin rubbed his fingers against his eyelids, wiping off oily tears. He ascended too soon. His life had barely begun. Tell me, Gunsol, how is it fair when our children are the ones who pay for our sins? It's not, Yuan conceded. Yet it happened, Mordigin replied. Lord Ko spent 5 years pursuing his path and took the lost age's sins upon himself when he ascended. All the wars, all the suffering, all the corpo spirits, and countless other horrors you will never have to experience. He recreated the world anew. He unmade it. This world is not unmade, his host insisted. It is unbuilt. Yuan frowned in confusion. What difference does it make? A big one. Mordigin waved a hand at the wasteland. Look upon this empty expanse. Where you see ruins, I see the wellspring of possibility, clay waiting to be molded in a better shape than what came before. He shook his head. Lord Ko gave us a second chance, and he received nothing but scorn in return. Seems to me your master didn't do a good job at cleaning up the rot, Yuan replied. The Flesh Mansion sect sounds very much like those megacore reborn. Not even the Wayfinders can change human nature, Gunsol, Mordigin replied. I suspect a few of them ascended to do exactly that and failed. The Black Moon seemed keen on dispelling falsehoods, but free will is a core component of the Tao and spins the wheel of karma. So we're free to repeat our mistakes? Maybe cultivators will fall into the same pitfalls as their predecessors, or maybe we will live up to the potential the spiral dancer saw in us. Mordigin waved the subject away. What matters is that we have a chance to make something better for ourselves, if enough good people sees it. Yuan clenched his jaw, then pondered the Sin-Eater's words while sipping his tea. The beverage no longer tasted so bitter on his tongue. The portrait Mordigin presented of his master contrasted so much with the image of the larger-than-life, all-powerful demon king the Skybiter was so often presented as. The man could be lying or remembering the past through the lenses of his own prejudice. Or maybe he was telling the truth. Yuan realized he didn't care all that much. Philosophy and grand metaphysics always flew over his head because they served little practical use. Whether he believed Mordigin's story or not didn't change anything about his situation. It didn't matter why. The world changed, only that it did. He had a more down-to-earth problem to deal with. You still haven't said anything about the cube, Yuan reminded him. I am getting there, young man, Mordigin reassured him. I simply gave you the context in which it was created.
Oh, all right.
My apologies for my impatience. Yuan had spent so long on the road he had forgotten how to speak politely to ancient cultivators. Mingxia would have scolded him for it. So this Natho Empire was one of these warring nations? NATO was one of the greatest military alliances of the Lost Age engaged in a confrontation with other nations, Mordigin said. In order to gather power for the inevitable world war everyone knew was on the horizon, many of these countries attempted to bind the demigods of ultra-violence into their service. They tried to bind the gun? The very idea sounded absurd to Yuan. No cultivator could control such a mindless force of slaughter and destruction. Is such a thing possible? The demigods of ultra-violence are no different from exceptionally powerful spirits or demons. It is possible to form contracts with them, or to trap and seal them. Obviously, nobody managed to do either with the gun, who was too strong and savage to behave. Mordigin refilled his empty cup. The nuke proved an easier target. I am not certain how NATO's cultivators managed to trap it in the cube, but they did. But if it's trapped there, how can there be nuclear cultivators running around? Mordigin pointed at Yuan's bullet core, which was stuck in his forehead. Did the gun personally fire the bullet that killed you?
Yuan's jaw clenched. No.
The demigods do not have to be physically present to influence the weapons that fuel their violent existence, Mordigin explained. NATO's leadership wished to exploit this relationship to win the war before it began. If the gun can empower others through bullets, even those that it didn't fire by itself, then they thought that the nuke could rear its children. My mentor mentioned weapons that could wipe out cities in the blink of an eye, Yuan muttered, his bullet core pounding in his skull. You're talking about them, aren't you? The children of the nuke. I'm afraid so. Mordigin let out a heavy sigh. Nuclear weapons are much rarer than guns, but far more devastating. I'd once read a report that said it would only take 400 of these nuclear weapons to wipe out humanity, and the world hosted over 12,000 of them before Lord Ko's ascension. Sadly, they aren't all gone or rusted. I suspect many of them sleep underground, waiting for the signal to awaken and set off the nuclear age. Yuan shuddered. He struggled to imagine such boundless destruction, but then again, the world had ended once already. He couldn't brush off Mordigin's warnings so easily. Why would this NATO empire do that?
Yuan asked.
Why would they destroy themselves? I doubt they ever intended to do anything so thorough as to bring about the nuclear age, his host replied. I suspect the cube was designed to partially bind the nuke to a summoning contract. Whoever controls the artifact may be able to partially control its prisoner, forcing it to either neuter hostile nuclear weapons or sabotage their enemy's arsenal. It may be why these devices continue to sleep underground. The nuke's seal prevents others from triggering them without the proper ritual. Which neatly explained why the Inyong Khan would seek this weapon. The ability to control these slumbering children of the nuke would make him the most powerful warlord in the unmade world. Weapons capable of wiping out cities with a mere blink would destroy his enemies and cow everyone else into following his orders. As for Manhattan's motives, what will happen if someone wakes them up? Yuan muttered under his breath. These nuclear weapons? If they detonate all at once? I cannot say for certain what would happen then, Mordigin replied. The children of the nuke may bathe the wasteland in searing light, after which the strongest cultivators and spirits will survive to inherit an irradiated grave. Life may endure and bounce back in some way, or it may not. Maybe time, the 7 ascendancies, and constant battles have destroyed enough sleeping bombs that their damage will remain localized. All I can say is that our world will become much less safe with the nuke spreading its brand of nuclear death. Yuan feared as much. Manhattan said that the cube could bring salvation to all. When Yuan stared at the horizon, at the desert that went on forever, he found himself having a vision of what the nuclear cultivator would see as the salvation of a broken, flawed world. A silent land bathed in nuclear light. Yuan finished his tea in silence. He still struggled to comprehend the full severity of their situation. Yuan was a courier at heart. His existence for the last few years revolved around traveling and delivering packages. He never signed on for a high-level cultivator conflict over a lost age relic capable of laying waste to civilization. He felt a sense of responsibility for carrying the cube of NATO around. Had Slash not intercepted him, Yuan might have successfully delivered it to Manhattan and doomed the wasteland to nuclear destruction. Even then, he might have only delayed the inevitable. Manhattan would try to recover the device, and the Inyong Khan would cause just as much trouble with that weapon in his possession. Yuan didn't wish to die again. He didn't want to see Orient and Holster swallowed in a flash of light and vaporized. But what could he do? Manhattan was way out of his league, let alone the Inyong Khan. While Yuan was pretty sure he could take out Slash if they ever fought again, his murderer was a small fry compared to these two. Ark might help if he convinced her of the threat that the nuke represented. Yuan shook his head. He refused to rely on another's mercy. If a man was a man, he honored his responsibilities, and the cube was one of his. Yuan needed to get stronger much quicker, but how could he do so when he struggled with his own path? Mordigin sensed his hesitation. You reek of guilt, Gunsoul. What weighs on your mind? Yuan wondered if he should tell the Sin Eater the truth for a moment. The man offered him answers about the cube without asking anything in return, so he felt obligated to return the favor. Have you heard of Flesh Market? I unfortunately have, Mordigin replied with distaste. Your followers came from that city of sin? They're here because of me. Yuan took a long gun-smoke breath. Partly. Mordigin listened in silence as Yuan told him about the Flesh Market sect war, the gun's attack on the city, and Revolver's ill-fated roulette game. The Sin Eater didn't provide any comment and simply poured them new cups of spirit leaf tea. I helped bring the gun to that city, killing thousands, Yuan said upon concluding his tale, his voice low and weak. He wouldn't lie his way out of this one. A gunsoul who showed me kindness is now trapped in a special kind of hell because of my short-sightedness. I see. Mordigin pondered what to say for a moment before nodding to himself. I will not say it wasn't your fault. You are right, you helped plant the seeds from which this disaster grew and stained your soul with sin. Yuan scoffed. Are you judging me, Sin Eater? It is not my place to do so. There is no sin that cannot be absolved with proper penance. Mordigin joined his hands in a meditative pose. If it is cleansing that you seek, I can provide you with a few options. Though he didn't entirely trust the Sin Eater path yet, Yuan guessed he had little to lose from listening. What do you offer? First, I can devour you and recreate you within my hungry belly. You will be purged of your bullet core and the gun path, but you will emerge with a new life of your own and purified flesh. You will be reborn free of your sins, free to begin again. Brand new. Yuan scowled. I'll be a scrap again. You will be brand new, Mordigin confirmed. Alternatively, I can purge your soul of its bad karma and allow it to reincarnate. You have accumulated some good karma of your own, so your next life should be pleasant. I can allow you to keep your memories too if you wish to join the ranks of the regressors and continue your cultivation. Yuan immediately rejected both proposals. Either would just be taking the coward's way out, and he refused to become a weakling again. I won't run away, Yuan said. Moreover, what good would it be to reincarnate in a world that a nuclear cultivator could destroy at any time? Unlawfully taken from Royal Road, this story should be reported if seen on Amazon. They have tried to free the nuke for half a century, and failed to this day, Mordigin countered. Maybe this time will be different, or maybe not. There will always be someone seeking to end the world. You shouldn't fear to live because your existence may end at any time. Even so, I can't let the cube fall into the wrong hands, Yuan replied, squinting at the Sin Eater. What about you? Will you take a stand? Mordigin shook his head. My role is to take upon the sins of those who seek absolution and give shelter to those who need it. I take no part in the Wasteland's disputes, and I have forsaken war long ago. I see. Many would have called him a coward, but Yuan wouldn't condemn the man who had given him supplies and advice for free when many would have demanded payment. It falls to me then. Mordigin stroked his chin. It is not your guilt that impairs your cycling, Gunsoul. It is fear. Fear that your path will always lead to the gun. Where else would it lead? The gun is the beginning and the end for us gun souls. The beginning, yes. The end, I do not think so. Mordigin sipped from his cup. I've met a nuclear cultivator too once.
Yuan frowned. Zarzoa.
No. A man who went by the name of Al. Mordigin set his cup back on the table and looked at the sun. Like all of his kind, he perished from radiation poisoning and rose from the dead by the will of the nuke for the express purpose of spreading the very same poison that killed him, a wish which Al denied.
That took Yuan aback.
He went against the nuke.
He tried.
This Al had no wish to kill his fellow man, but such is a nuclear cultivator's power that they passively befoul the land around them with radiation. From what he told me, he spent many years wandering the wastes as a hermit until he happened upon an ancient power plant. Yuan had heard of those lost-age installations. They used to produce electricity with fuel of all sorts before men discovered how to use qi. Scrap scavengers lived inside the facility, but they couldn't get it to work, Mordigin explained.
Until Al came to them.
Realizing that the central reactor could contain his radioactive aura, he offered to fuel it on behalf of these people. When I last visited him, they called him Reactor Al, and his plant supplied an entire settlement of 1,000 inhabitants with electrical power. Like that? Yuan asked with skepticism. He didn't irradiate the area nor blow up?
No.
Reactor Al turned his path into a blessing rather than a curse. Mordigin locked eyes with Yuan. If a creature like this man who was created to bring ruin to all, could overcome his nature and become a positive force in this world, then what excuse do you have, Gunsoul? Yuan never had a way with words, and few could affect him. Yet he always strived to listen to advice and learn from others' wisdom whenever he could. Mordigin's tale and question nagged at him. Ark had Yuan swear never to be a friend to a nuclear cultivator because she didn't believe any of them could become good. If so, then how could they explain the case of Reactor Al, assuming he indeed existed? Is it even possible for us Gunsouls to choose our own way in this world? Yuan wondered. We arise by the will of the gun, and he always comes for us in the end. Its power, its evil. Mindless savagery. The gun cannot take away your free will, not unless you play by its rules. You can rise above the slaughter and violence to become something else, something better, Mordigin insisted with confidence. That Haito Bashara who travels with you. I sensed great suffering in her when I first saw her. She was a slave, wasn't she? Yes, Yuan confirmed softly. I killed her captors. Could you have saved that girl without a gun? Could you have protected her since without the gun path?
Yuan's jaw clenched. No.
Then why would you call a gun evil, if it gave you the power to do the right thing?
Mordigin shrugged.
A firearm is no more noble nor vile than a sword, which many heroes carried into battle to defeat great evils. Any tool can be wielded for revenge or justice. You're saying I could become, what, a gun that protects?
Yes, Mordigin confirmed.
The gun is not the end of your path, but an end, death for death's sake. In the same way, a road can lead to multiple destinations. We determine our path as much as it guides us forward. The Flesh Mansion sect you encountered in Flesh Market were ruffians, slavers and organ thieves, but I have met other offshoots that help farmers plant better crops and help the sick achieve their ideal bodies. The same way a path can take many forms, it has as many interpretations as there are individual perspectives. Yuan could see that. He had witnessed Ark and Revolver both use very different authorities, although they both followed the gun path. They had chosen a specific interpretation of it that suited their skills and personality, a will so strong that it grew to overwrite the Tao itself, and in Revolver's case, temporarily defeat the gun. If a path could branch so far to take such radically different expressions, then where would Yuan's bullet hell lead him to? Yuan's gut told him he would find the answer within himself. Mordigin had given much to think about. Thank you for your tea and wisdom, Honorable Sin Eater, Yuan said with sincere gratitude. I may have been wrong about you. Think nothing of it, Mordigin replied with a bellowing chuckle. I pray that my words helped you achieve the clarity your mind aspires to. It gave me perspective at least, but, Yuan looked at the horizon, imagining the moon about to rise beyond it. I think I'll need to consult someone else first before I achieve true clarity. Wisdom comes from many places. Mordigin set aside his teacup and turned to look at the ceramic pots he kept in his room. How about I teach you how to harvest and safekeep spirit herbs? I would love to. Yuan would continue his cultivation with diligence, whichever path he chose to follow. Mordigin proved to be a very different teacher than Ark. Ark's training sessions had gotten Yuan used to practical exercises and the occasional attempts to make him figure out technique intricacies on his own, learn how to learn, in her own words. Mordigin instead preferred detailed and in-depth explanations while happily answering Yuan's questions in a clear and concise manner. He was, in short, someone more interested in teaching theory first rather than jumping into practice. Yuan couldn't tell whether he was always this way or whether the subject matter demanded that kind of approach. A gardener had to select the right seeds, set up feng shui-powered fields to maximize levels of elemental qi concentration, and then provide proper nourishment. The lesson bored Yuan to death. Cultivating spirit fruits and herbs demanded a patience and gentle touch he just didn't have. When Mordigin taught him a few barrier setups that could maximize what the qi plants could absorb, Yuan's first thought was how he could apply them in battle. He spaced out during half the lesson in spite of his sincere attempts to listen. Yuan was starting to believe his intuitive understanding of techniques, which Gaiac outright called prodigious, was limited to combat applications. Meanwhile, Holster proved extremely adept at the field. Mordigin invited her to attend his lessons, which she followed with a lot more assiduity than Yuan himself. She not only learned Mordigin's barrier arrays on her first try, but swiftly improved upon their designs to increase qi concentration by 5%, a feat that delighted her teacher. She's picking things up so quickly, Yuan thought with pride after he observed her refresh a spirit trees with the right barrier. It makes me wonder how she would do without her human pillar restrictions. Unfortunately, Mordigin couldn't do anything on her behalf. I can offer her the same solutions I gave you, Gunsoul, rebirth as a normal girl or a better reincarnation. I'm afraid only the likes of the Flesh Mansion sect have the knowledge to repair her core without outright disabling it. Holster didn't seem keen on either, especially since they involved Mordigin eating her first. Yuan's charge had hugged him tightly the moment he outlined those solutions. Having nearly been devoured by a radhag had soured her on the idea. Thankfully, Mordigin offered them another possibility. While most of the Flesh Mansion sect offshoots are allied with the Inyong Khan, there are some in Battletown who take no side and might agree to operate on the girl for the proper price. Seek the man called Jared Lacher. He might be able to help you. While Yuan wasn't keen on encountering that sect again, he thanked Mordigin for the lead. It wouldn't cost anything to interrogate this man once they hit Battletown. Others did take up Mordigin on his offer though. Scraps without a future, traumatized people who had lost their family during the Flesh Market sect war, bullet church cultists who abandoned the faith, or ruffians eager to escape karmic justice. More people than Yuan expected gave themselves to the Sin Eater, though Bucket surprisingly wasn't among them. He guessed that when you had lost everything, it was easy to restart somewhere else from nothing. That must have been what the Skybiter hoped for when he consumed the Lost Age. In any case, Lady Tama graciously allowed them to spend the night at her station. While Holster enjoyed a good night's rest inside, Yuan proceeded to cycle on the upper floor of a building, a window open to let the moonlight through. He had a much easier time meditating tonight, though he hadn't reached his peak efficiency yet. He welcomed the moon's energies into himself until they helped burn away his false flesh to reveal the true steel lurking underneath. These changes frightened him at first, but now they felt natural. Like a snake shedding its suffocating skin for smoother scales. He sensed a familiar presence approaching.
Orient.
Yuan whispered upon awakening from his cycling, the cold glow of the black moon shining on his skin. I did not wish to interrupt your meditation, honored guest Yuan. Orient very carefully stayed in the shadow beyond the moonlight's grasp and put a platter of spirit fruits within his reach. I am surprised you heard me coming. I did my best to stay quiet. I didn't hear you. I smelled you. Orient had a pleasant aroma around her, a mix of a gentle engine smell and perfumed interiors. My senses are sharpening. They are not the only things about you that sharpen, honored guest Yuan, Orient noted, her gaze darting at his arms. Razor-sharp, layered metal sheets now replaced his skin from shoulder to elbow, and when he stared at his reflection inside them, he saw his bullet core buried under a metal plate covering his forehead. That one reminded him of the side of his old handgun. Remembering his first weapon filled him with nostalgia. You know, my earliest memory is of being given a gun, Yuan told Orient. I recall being dragged out of my bed by a marauder band alongside 5 other children and being told we would fight for some warlord whose name I've long forgotten. That handgun had been his first weapon, and the one which Slash stole from him. In a way, Yuan guessed his first life began and stopped with it. Its absence bothered him to his very core. I am sorry to hear that, Orient replied with genuine sorrow. Was this the source of your childhood nightmares? This content has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. Report any instances of this story if found elsewhere.
No.
Those came later. Yuan looked up at the moonlight. As much as he used to fear moonburns, The stellar glow helped clear his mind and loosen his tongue. They started with Chun.
Chun.
I think that was his name.
He cooked our food.
A second coil cultivator cleaved his face asunder with his bare hands. Now that the floodgate had opened, Yuan found himself unable to stop. When I killed my first man, I didn't particularly enjoy it, but I didn't dislike it either. It's just something I did. I can't recall the faces of the people I killed, but I remember Chun bleeding out on the ground well enough. It's weird. Although Yuan had had many years to process and bury that trauma, it still weighed on his soul. He'd had a hard time connecting with anybody since. Getting close to people meant suffering when the wasteland took them away. Orient stared at him for a few seconds, her golden eyes brimming with sorrow and empathy. I sincerely apologize for my forwardness. I did not wish to cause you pain. It's fine, Yuan replied with a shrug. He had many years to bury his pain properly. I haven't told many people about it. Not even your former companions?
Not even them.
He supposed that was a sign he never allowed himself to grow too attached to Mingxia and Jialong, something which he now regretted. I feel I can trust you with this. That you'd listen. Yuan's own reaction surprised him. The last few weeks since he rose from the grave did more to help him open up to others than all his years of wandering. After spending years on the road keeping others at arm's length, he finally felt ready to trust again. It all started when he encountered Holster. Yuan guessed taking care of her had softened him. That, or becoming a gunsoul, gave him the confidence he needed. Now he had the power to protect those he cared about. I appreciate your trust in me, honored guest Yuan, Orient replied with a graceful bow. Your words haven't fallen on deaf ears, I assure you. I always seek to better understand humanity. So many of my passengers require my help, but how can I soothe their pain when I do not comprehend it? You look more human to me than most. Orient had shown him more kindness than most people he'd encountered across the wasteland. Because you care. Thank you for your kind words, honored guest Yuan. Orient joined her hands and mulled over something for an instant. Lady Tama agreed to let me borrow enough cars to double my length. With Miss Holster's assistance and new designs, I should be able to not only optimize space within myself to house all of our new passengers, but also support a greenhouse car for food production. If I cannot ferry these people to a proper destination, then I hope that I can become their home. That's good, Yuan decided. He mostly considered using the spirit train for courier jobs, but turning it into a moving settlement didn't bother him at all. This would help sustain their passengers until they decided to settle down in a safer place. If such a thing existed. Do you agree with this plan?
Orient asked him.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Yuan squinted at Orient. Why ask for my permission? It's your body, not mine. I find it difficult to consider you a guest anymore, Orient replied with a warm chuckle. You and Miss Holster have become akin to conductors to me. I feel greater concern for you than my other passengers and defer to your judgment. Is conductor another word for friend? Yuan asked, his mood improving slightly. If so, then it's mutual. Orient hadn't hesitated to ram herself into a demigod of ultra-violence to save his life. As far as Yuan was concerned, he trusted her with his back. I am honored. Orient's cheeks turned slightly pinker for a moment, until she quickly regained her composure. I sense another visitor approaching us. Yuan nodded calmly and then focused back on the moon. A shadow appeared above him, gently riding the night wind on a dark umbrella.
Right on time.
We meet again, Yuan Guang. Lady Kagaya of the Moonlight Sect greeted him with a smile upon floating at his level, her feet dangling into the void. I am delighted to make your acquaintance too, Orient Junction TR61. The pleasure is all mine, honored visitor Kagaya, Orient replied with a deep bow. I hope you had a pleasant journey to this station. Every journey is pleasant under the moon's guidance. Kagaya smiled at Yuan next. I take it that you have questions pertaining to our moonlight path? She could read him like a sutra scroll. You could say that, Yuan said. I have 2 questions for you first. Kagaya chuckled to herself, her voice ringing softly into the night. Ask away. Have you heard of the perfect shot? Yes, I have, Kagaya replied calmly. It is the only way for one to escape the gun's curse as far as I know, though I have no idea how to land it. I see, Yuan muttered to himself. So the perfect shot indeed existed. Then my last question, would your path let me use it?
Kagaya shook her head. I'm afraid not.
All of the demigods of ultraviolence paths bear the seed of their own destruction. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Only a gun could defeat the gun. Yuan had expected as much. Scratch that, he had always known that deep within himself. He didn't think the gun only sought and raised gun souls to pass the curse along. Somewhere deep within its cursed core, its victims were looking for the right one. The gunslinger who would finally break the cycle. Now that he had confirmed the perfect shot's existence, Yuan no longer hesitated. His heart finally achieved clarity. Then I take it you have reached a decision, Kaguya said. I have. Yuan held his head high. I'm a gunsoul through and through. His path was set, and he would see it to the end. He owed it to Revolver and to the people who perished by the gun's hands. To Ak too. He would free Revolver from his curse or die trying. Disappointing, but not unexpected, Kaguya replied with a small sigh. The truth became clear to me the more I investigated you. At 100 thresholds, facing 100 foes, you always chose to pick a gun and return fire. You were born on the gun path twice over. Sorry, Yuan apologized. Though he disliked sex on principle, Kaguya didn't strike him as a bad person. She was friendly enough and thus deserved basic courtesy. I didn't want to waste your time. You have not. You win some, you lose some. She put a finger on her lips. Though if you want to make up for my disappointment, I would like to offer your little band a job. Yuan straightened up, as did Orient. A job, Lady Kaguya? She asked. What kind? A dangerous one, Kaguya conceded, as all sect jobs were bound to be. The Moonlight sect has kept tabs on current events. Your current decision has all but put you on a collision course with the Inyong Khan's army. Yuan clenched his jaw. They were disturbingly well informed. Yeah, that's true. Each year, the Inyong Khan organizes a competition in Battletown, Kaguya explained. The History Road course, where cultivators are free to battle with spirit cars and vehicles in a blood-soaked race. This year's tournament promises to be the biggest of them all, for the Khan promises a special prize to the winner on top of the usual fantastical spoils. A race. Orient tilted her head to the side. You wish me to serve as your sect's vehicle? You may participate under your own flag, Kaguya replied. We do not ask you to seize the prize, as much as you help our agents ensure no one else can. Yuan clenched his fists. He had a gut feeling about what victory in this race entailed. What's that special prize? Destruction. Kaguya's fair face twisted into a dark scowl in the moon's shadow. Whoever wins will pick a target for the Khan to annihilate, with an arrow of light. The group ended up staying one more day at the station, during which the spirit train changed quite a bit. Orient incorporated 10 more wagons into herself, doubling her length and greatly expanding her facilities. Yuan partly contributed to their restoration by practicing item materialization. Though his intuitive understanding of firearms was of limited use when repairing wagons, he discovered he had an affinity when it came to creating and replicating metallic objects. Gears, bolts, pipes, pistons. Yuan suspected consuming Gatling Man's core let him assimilate part of his metallist training. Working on item materialization helped him understand a few things about chi bullets as well. Ark called it an adaptive technique that other cultivators could replicate, although the effects changed for any kind of firearm. Yuan's third coil-enhanced senses finally let him understand what she meant. As it turned out, his body automatically charged his projectiles with a different chi frequency depending on the firearm used. It was so subtle and intuitive, and the frequency differences so minor, that Yuan had no idea it happened until he paid close attention to the process. He supposed he could compare it to walking. Any man knew how to put one foot ahead of the other, but few understood how muscles work together to achieve that result. This discovery opened up new possibilities for Yuan. If he could artificially reproduce a specific chi frequency, then he could infuse any bullet with any effect of his choice. This is quite the big change, Yuan told Orient as they walked along the train's length with Holster, taking in every detail. It is no less spectacular than yours, honored conductor Yuan, Orient replied, which was true. Finding his resolve to pursue the gun path removed Yuan's cycling obstacles too. His productivity increased tenfold, and the changes creeping up on his body no longer felt discomforting. He had accepted himself and cleared his mind. Yuan hardly recognized himself when he looked in the mirror this morning. His body appeared to be constantly under the effect of a powerful elemental infusion. Every patch of his skin had turned into sleek metal, his muscles were closer to servos than flesh, and his nerves had been entirely replaced with circuitry. His lead lungs breathed air and exhaled gun smoke. Holes in his palms and feet formed an interconnected network with the thrusters on his back to evenly distribute the recoil fist's power. His bullet core had vanished under a protective plate of stainless black carbon. Even his eyes looked more like a pair of glass scope implants than organic eyeballs. Bullets bounced off them too. He knew he had checked. Many would have likely mistaken Yuan for a medalist at first glance if every part of himself didn't scream gun. To onlookers, the steel sheets covering his limbs made them look closer to rifles than arms and legs. His shoulder resembled safeties. Even his teeth had transformed into bullets. Yet none of it looked artificial. Unlike cybernetic implants, everything about Yuan seemed homegrown. He had become a living weapon. Nonetheless, his transformation paled before that of the spirit train. Orient had not only doubled her number of wagons from 10 to 20, but reshaped them completely. The locomotive had lengthened slightly to accommodate both the engine and private sleeping quarters for Yuan and Holster, since they had been promoted to the elusive rank of conductors. Next came 5 wagons forming a feng shui sequence, as each of the 5 elements was individually concentrated inside them. The first, which gathered fire-aligned qi, resembled a mix between individual quarters and a temple, with tall pillars of superheated metal surrounding a private chamber. The heat made Yuan suffocate. Fire was his native metal's natural enemy, and the sheer concentration of this element in the area weakened his own. Which was likely the plan. This is Ark's wagon, Yuan guessed. You'll use fire qi to weaken her authority and better contain it. Quite astute, honored conductor Yuan, Orient quickly confirmed. As the car closest to the engine, it will receive the largest share of qi and allow me to increase the output should Lady Ark require assistance. Holster grabbed Orient's and Yuan's hands, then proudly led them deeper into the train. Outsiders would probably have mistaken them for a young girl visiting a new home with her parents, a thought which pleased Yuan more than he expected it to. His metal skin didn't bother Holster in the slightest either, which he took as a good sign. The next car, fueled by Earth-aligned qi, served as an ammo depot. It was one of the 3 wagons equipped with a cannon on the roof, which Bucket and the others had implemented in record time. The 2 other artillery pieces are located on the 12th and final wagons to protect the entire length of my body, Orient explained as she then introduced the metal-aligned car, a simple, bagua-shaped meditation room concentrating its qi in the center. This is your focus room, honored conductor Yuan. If you encounter this tale on Amazon, note that it's taken without the author's consent. Report it. This feels more like home, Yuan said as he basked in the ambient qi. It seeped into his body so easily. His bullet core hardly needed to process it. Thank you. I appreciate this gift. Holster beamed with pride and gratitude, then happily showed him the rest of her creations. The water-aligned wagon housed a massive clean reservoir that would replenish itself by tapping into the ley lines Orient rode along, which then fueled the wood-aligned car, a vast greenhouse of rows after rows of spirit herbs nourished by automated sprinklers and separated by fruit trees. Yuan took a moment to study them. Most of the strains gathered here were offshoots gifted by Lady Tama and Mordigin. The constant influx of wood qi hastened their growth until they'd already started burgeoning. Their fruits wouldn't match the quality of crops produced by a sect, and most cultivators would laugh rather than consume them. However, they could produce quick harvests and feed the spirit train's passengers easily enough. Rations would be steady, if minimal. Yuan doubted the passengers would mind. Guaranteed access to food and clean water, private spaces, and protection from wasteland threats was a better deal than what most sects offered to scraps. The train's structure afterward matched what Yuan expected. The treasure car remained relatively unchanged, besides an added floor to maximize storage space. The next 10 wagons were bi-level sleeping cars housing 2 sets of 7 cabins, 4 of them individual and 3 double-size ones for families. Everyone would have to share a single washroom and shower, but that was more luxury than most were used to anyway. Bucket's car did give Yuan pause though. What's this? Yuan asked when he stepped into the double-sized cabin. Bucket had removed the berths to free space to invite a small group of former Bullet Church cultists inside. The group had set up the strangest of altars to worship at. Namely, they prayed to a small metal statue of Lady Tama. Railing, Master Conductor. Bucket greeted Yuan with the same unshakable enthusiasm he had lost after the gun's attack. He then bowed in front of Orient while making a noise that vaguely resembled her train whistle. Bless thee, Holy Orient, for giving us life and direction today. Bless you, honored Brakeman Bucket, Orient replied with a mischievous grin which Yuan quickly noticed seemed quite forced, a detail which Bucket completely missed. Is everyone ready to depart? All tickets have been issued and the luggage stored. Bucket replied with beaming pride. We await your call to continue our journey towards the promised station, as foretold by the goddess Tama. After the flesh market disaster shattered Bucket's faith, Yuan suggested that he put his faith in a deity that would appreciate his worship. The man had unfortunately taken his advice literally. Excellent, Orient replied while clapping her hands with some nervousness. In that case, It is time to say goodbye to Lady Tama. Please ensure everyone waves at her from the window on our way out, she will appreciate it. As you command, train mother. Bucket replied with enthusiasm. Yuan began to wonder if he didn't prefer him depressed. You're okay with this nonsense? Yuan asked Orient after they left Bucket behind to check the rest of the train. Fortunately, his new train church madness hadn't spread too far yet. You didn't seem too keen on it. Not entirely, Orient replied, which sounded more like a no to Yuan. But our passengers need something to believe in. Besides, I believe Lady Tama appreciates the attention. She agreed to lend us a cat station master to bless our passengers with meows and purrs. Yuan grunted and decided to wash his hands off the mess. He guessed it was easier to go along with it than shake the likes of Bucket from their delusions. Thankfully, their newfound mania also translated into discipline and organization. The passengers followed Orient's demands to the letter, cleaning up after themselves and moving their luggage to their proper places. They had also set up sniper nests in various cabins to allow their members to fire at enemies, a task that they would have to fulfill soon enough. I received 2 reports of those plastic scouts lurking near the station, honored conductor Yuan, Orient informed him as they oversaw the kitchen and mess hall wagons. Those had been separated due to the increase in passenger capacity. Should we expect an attack? Yes, but only on our way to Battletown, Yuan replied. The plastic men have no reason to think we'll turn back to pick up Ark, so I doubt they'll have an ambush set up on our way back to Headshot Forge. We can expect a raid once we move past Lady Tama's station, however. Have you fought them before? Orient asked, which Yuan confirmed with a sharp nod. What strategy should we adopt then? The plastic men are lost age trash who have gained sentience and arose from a plastic continent to the east, Yuan explained. They're not too smart and are very fragile, but some can cultivate and they always travel in large groups. They don't know fear and lack vital organs, so the best way to deal with them is to dismember them. That or fire. I see. I shall brief our defenders accordingly. Orient led them into the panoramic car, where a small crowd gathered around the spotted cat that Yuan had seen hanging around holster. The animal too wore a cap and a small collar marked after Orient's designation. Let me introduce you to our new traveling station master, Gautama. The female cat, recognizing her name, immediately moved to rub herself against Yuan's feet. Holster quickly and happily took her in her arms, which delighted him. While he wasn't an animal person, Yuan was glad his charge had found a new friend. What's this feeling? Yuan wondered as he moved to the end of the train, opening the window to get a better look at the station. His steel heart warmed up in his chest. I'm hopeful for once. He knew he should keep his guard up though. The date Kagaya gave them for the History Road competition left them just enough time to pick up Ark and then move on to Battletown. The Moonlight Cultivator promised that her sex allies would secure all the necessary paperwork for their induction. Great danger awaited them ahead of the road. Yet somehow, taking revenge on Slash and his kind seemed so minor compared to greater looming threats that Yuan hardly gave it any thought. He still intended to follow through with it, but it was no longer his highest priority. When he looked at Orient, Holster, and the strange community on board the spirit train, only one thought crossed his mind. He didn't want them to live in a world ruled by the Inyong Khan or devastated by Manhattan. Nor did he wish for them to suffer from the gun savagery as they had already. That was a cause he would kill for. They left the station by sundown. An army of cats sang a symphony on their way out. Yuan would have expected this to result in a terrible cacophony, but their caretaker spirit had drilled them to musical perfection. They all purred and meowed in unison. As for Mordigin and the few passengers who elected to become his future meal, they simply waved them off. Goodbye, goodbye. Lady Tama shouted as the spirit train left the station. See you at the next station, yes, yes. Goodbye, Lady Tama. Orient waved back from the locomotive window, her words echoed by gunfire. Bucket and the others thought it wise to waste some spare ammo on their departure, which slightly annoyed Yuan. Creating bullets consumed chi, and he was loath to use more than he should. Nonetheless, they managed to reach Headshot Forge without encountering the plastic men and picked up Ark easily enough. True to her word, she agreed to set up shop in the fire car if it managed to suppress her authority. Is it working? Yuan asked his mentor once she set foot inside her allocated space. Headshot Forge began to overlay with the temple structure the moment Ark set foot inside, with the air smelling of gunpowder and the pillars supporting the roof taking on the shape of rifle barrels. The changes were noticeable, but nowhere near as spectacular as Yuan would have expected. Sort of, Ark replied with a shrug. It's less comfortable for me than when I sit on a ley line directly, and I could break out easily if I tried. And if you don't? Then it's manageable, though any breach in the design will cause my authority to go haywire again. Sucks for anyone entering too. I don't think I can stop myself from attacking scraps. Orient set up a secondary hallway that goes around the seal, Yuan explained. We'll restrict access to this car too.
Good. I don't like company.
Ark approached one of the few windows and studied it. Is this insulated glazing and plexiglass?
Can't tell, Yuan replied.
Holster and Orient built this place.
A smart design choice.
You've built quite the moving fortress for yourself. The wasteland beyond the window remained untouched by Ark's authority, which seemed to please her. Why did you come back? Yuan shrugged his iron shoulders. I've decided to stick to the gun path. Yeah, I figured.
Ark snickered in disdain.
She clearly didn't support his choice. What I can't decide is whether you decided to do that out of stupidity or ambition.
Neither.
I'm what I am, that's all. Her skepticism washed over Yuan like water on the eternal shore. I want a free revolver from his curse, and sticking to my guns is the only way to do it. So you've fallen for that perfect shot fairy tale too?
Ark shook her head.
You're going to waste your half-life the same way I did. Better gun souls than us have tried and failed to defeat the gun.
Maybe I'll succeed where they couldn't, maybe not.
Can't know until I try, and someone has to.
For what?
To help another condemned soul rest in peace by taking on their burden. Although Ark continued to face the window, Yuan sensed her attention focusing on the revolver on his belt. Did that man mean that much to you? I owe him my life, but I would have stuck to the gun path even if I didn't. Yuan took a deep breath. I've met someone who lived through the unmaking. He told me the world wasn't unmade, but unbuilt.
Ark snorted. Yeah, right.
I thought the same at first, Yuan replied. But now I think there's some truth to it. Look out the window. Ark waved a hand at the endless desert and barren rocks. What can you build on this grave? You can hardly put up a wall before some sect or demon demigod knocks it down. Not if we stop them. Yuan ignored Ark's mocking grunt. Ever heard of Gatesville?
No. Figured, Yuan replied.
It's a town within an hour's ride from the irradiated city where you and Zarzoa duked it out years ago. A small settlement full of homeless, drunks, and down-their-luck couriers who raised their village over a highway's ruins. Nothing to write home about.
Ark bristled. What's your point?
It's not a good place, but it still stands, Yuan replied. If you hadn't stopped Zoa, then Gatesville would be a radioactive crater by now. None of its inhabitants would be alive without you. You might be reading a pirated copy. Look for the official release to support the author.
Ark scoffed.
What good did it do, letting them waste away for a few more years? The same thing that keeps us up each morning, I suppose, Yuan replied. The hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Living one more day was a victory in itself in the unmade world. Mordigen's words about the world being unbuilt also resonated with Yuan. So did Revolver's desire to take out the trash that infested it, and then Orient's quest to provide a home to her passengers. So why couldn't Yuan leave the world in a better place than he found it? You made a difference, a good one, Yuan told his mentor. I want to do the same, and I think you do too. Ark turned her head at her student. She studied him for a moment without a word, until her lips curved a little. Yuan had rarely seen Ark smile, and when she did, her lips always carried a mocking edge. Her student's successes hardly managed to do more than bemuse her. Yet this time, her smile betrayed another emotion, something he would expect from Orient and Holster rather than from his cynical mentor.
Fondness. It shook him to his core. Ark.
Something's changed about you, she said softly. You know what you really want now.
Yeah.
I think I do. A picture of Holster and Orient smiling crossed his mind. I don't care about the world, but I like some of the people that live in it. I want to protect them and ensure they're happy. He wasn't scared of caring anymore. You can't guarantee that. Ark's smile faded away. This world will disappoint you again and again. I hope you understand that. I'm fine with it, Yuan replied. I've chosen to stick to my guns to the bitter end. Bitter it'll be, yeah, but I respect your resolve. Ark sat in the middle of the room and adopted a meditation pose. I'll keep teaching you.
Thank you.
Yuan sat in front of her. Before we continue our lessons, have you heard of the History Road?
No. Ark scowled.
I've got the feeling I won't like what I'm about to hear.
Probably not.
Yuan recounted what Mordigen and Kagaya told him. Mentioning reactor Al drew a snicker of disbelief from Ark, though she listened to everything else in grim silence. Having nearly died fighting a nuclear cultivator, the thought of their patron demigod escaping its prison didn't please her in the slightest. Once Yuan had finished his explanation, Ark snapped her fingers and materialized a cigarette with item materialization. It set itself alight the moment she stuffed it in her mouth.
Divide and conquer, eh?
Ark muttered to herself. That's quite the power move from that tinpot con, getting sex to fight each other for his favor. And Manhattan will try to steal the cube at the first opportunity. The Moonlighters too. It's their ways, pulling strings to keep their dirty hands clean. Ark exhaled a cloud of smoke. For once, she seemed to seriously care. We can't leave that cube in anybody's hands, you understand? That thing is death in a box. We've got to bury that thing somewhere no one will ever find it again.
Agreed.
Yuan had no idea how to truly dispose of the cube, but they would cross that bridge once they reached it. Winning the competition seems to be our best shot at gaining an audience with the con and recovering the cube. Do you think we could take him down together?
Ark scowled. Maybe?
I would tell you to dig his ditch a few years back, but I've heard that the con has an authority and I'm past my prime. Not sure we've got this in the bag even if we team up against him. She pressed the cigarette on her lips. Manhattan is gonna be a pain in the ass too. If you're serious about getting the cube out of his hands and fulfill your vow, I'll have to work you to the bone. A proposal that Yuan eagerly accepted. I've been cycling relentlessly since our last meeting, he said. Is my iron flesh ready to use an innate technique?
Almost.
Your body has become a, Ark searched her word for a moment. I guess you could say a base template. Engraving an innate technique and crossing the fourth coil means that you must customize it in a way unique to your chosen path. Yuan shivered upon recalling Gaiak's hideous transformation. Like by growing new organs? That's the flesh mansion path, Ark replied. In our case, we must align our core and body with a specific type of firearm. I vibe with sniper rifles, and your revolver pal. Well, you can guess his pick from the name. A weapon he affectionate the most? Yuan could think of one possibility. I feel most at home with handguns, but I'm fine using any kind of firearm. I'll take whatever works.
Odd.
Remind me how your reflection looked when you braved the moonburns. A demon with a gun barrel for a face, Yuan replied, which sent shivers down his spine. Now that he thought of it, his soul reflected the gun in many ways. With skulls on the chest, a minigun for a hand, and a blazing cannon for another. Ark thoughtfully pondered his description in silence, inhaling and exhaling smoke. You're closer to the gun than most of us. Somehow, she didn't make it sound like a good thing. What does that mean? That war is hell. Ark scrammed her cigarette against the floor, something that would likely annoy Orient. From what I hear, I don't think you have an association with any particular firearm. Your soul aligns with a more abstract concept. Yuan already knew what, deep within himself.
Bullet hell.
Yeah, Ark replied with a sharp nod. I think I understand now why you pick up combat techniques so quickly, and why you struggle with spirit botany. Your soul thrives on strife. Deep down, you see yourself as a gun-blazing demon battling its way through a war like hell. Fighting isn't a means to an end to you, it's your natural state. I don't fight for its own sake, Yuan argued. He wasn't like the gun. I've only killed to defend myself or others. I suppose I misjudged it. Battle without purpose is mindless carnage.
Bullet hell.
Bullet hell. Ark's head perked up in realization.
Ah, I get it.
Get what? Real demons don't foster evil on Earth, Ark explained. They punish the wicked in hell. That's what your soul sees itself as. The idea appealed to Yuan. Come to think of it, the first time he took up arms for another was when he slaughtered the slavers holding holster. Are there good demons in the world? They serve a purpose, same as caretaker spirits. Ark nodded to herself again, as if reaching a decision. Okay, I know which gun path innate technique we're going to engrave into your core and flesh. Her lips stretched into a sinister smirk. Gun demon incarnation. Engraving an innate technique turned out to be a very literal experience. The third coil's changes had been automatic so far, natural. Yuan hardly had to think about them. The mere act of cycling replaced his human flesh with chi-forged steel. Learning an innate technique meant directing that transformation. Ark had him write sutras onto his nervous circuits first, an act which required him to cycle in a very precise and deliberate way.
It hurt too.
Each inscription, each word set his neurons ablaze with pain. Struggling yet?
Ark asked. Teacher and student meditated face to face in a lotus position, though she mostly cycled to show him how to engrave sutra scripts on his nerves. The actual words came to Yuan in flashes of inspiration. It's hard, Yuan replied with a grunt as a flash of agony coursed through his spine. The sutras come on their own, but metal is not paper. Yuan couldn't quite explain it. He had been dubious when Ark insisted the correct scripts would come to him during meditation, but they did. Strings of words written in a language he did not recognize flared in his mind when he cycled. Yuan intuitively understood their meaning. Gun, firearm, gunsmoke, bullet, hell. All the words that could be used to describe his chosen bullet hell subpath and resolve. Surviving the moonburns cleared your chi circuits of emotional sludge and strengthened your spiritual awareness, Ark explained. You are hearing your soul's whispers and aligning your body with it. Is that why you had me brave the Black Moon's trial? Yuan asked. To make this step easier? Everyone should brave the moonburns. Ark scoffed. Engraving your soul's chosen path sutras is only the first step to crossing the fourth coil. Next, you will have to weave the scripts into your very core, and only then will you be able to learn innate techniques. Considering how much pain tuning his body to the gun path and its branches required, Yuan could guess doing the same with his bullet core would be immeasurably worse. No matter. He would bear any pain for victory's sake. Orient's train whistle echoed across the wagon, followed by an announcement whose content Yuan could already guess. Honored Conductor Yuan, Lady Ark, I have detected a large dust cloud coming from the south, Orient announced. I suspect a sizable vehicle fleet is on its way to intercept us. The plastic men, Yuan guessed. He interrupted his cycling and rose to his feet. He could use some action. Orient, tell everyone to tool up. I'll be on my way to the roof. No, Ark said. Yuan scowled at her. I can't just stand here and watch. You can go. Ark pointed at the revolver on his belt with her chin. Just not with that. Yuan quickly caught on. No need for weapons when you are one. If you're serious about becoming a gun, then you'll have to act the part, Ark said before returning to her meditation. I would tell you good luck, but real cultivators make their own. Would tell you to watch, Yuan replied as he surrendered his revolver to her. But I know you'll do it anyway. Yuan could have sworn he had heard Ark chuckling when he exited the wagon. As he'd guessed, she was invested in his progress. Yuan walked up a ladder to the fire wagon's roof under the midday sun. A handful of gunners had taken over the 3 artillery pieces, with Bucket himself taking over the cannon near the locomotive. Iron barrels peeked out of the spirit train's windows along its entire length. A few people on the upper floors also carried Molotov cocktails, named after the famous folk fire path cultivator, ready to ignite once the enemy approached. The passengers had no shortage of weapons and ammo on board, but whether they had the skills to make good use of them remained to be seen. Ensure your favorite authors get the support they deserve. Read this novel on the original website. Yuan only had to take a look to see the dust rising on the horizon. It was huge, blanketing a large part of the desert and quickly gaining ground on the spirit train due to its slower speed, an unfortunate consequence of Orient redirecting a sizable amount of her chi to keeping Ark's authority suppressed and doubling her length. Yuan focused on the dust with his enhanced senses. He analyzed the faint yet strengthening vibrations spreading through the air to estimate the number of enemies, smelled the streams of burnt fuel in the air to identify what kind of vehicles produced them, and studied the faint hints of yellow smoke mixed with the dirt. 23 vehicles, mostly cars, with a few motorbikes, Yuan ascertained, his jaw clenching as he identified a massive object among their number. And something heavier than all of them combined. A party that size was bound to have cultivators with them. Plastic men were usually nothing to write home about in that department, but Yuan knew better than to underestimate anybody. The heavy vehicle traveling with the party bothered him the most. Yuan briefly wondered if the plastic men had found a spirit train of their own until he sensed the presence of a vile, poisonous chi in the dust cloud. Thick orange smog grew visible among the dust. The chi was too wild for a cultivator, and only one kind of spirit beast shared a kinship with plastic men. Trashamoths. No wonder they think they can take on Orient, Yuan thought before shouting a warning. They have a Trashamoth with them. A few barrels wavered in unease, at least for those familiar with the term. Bucket's cannon wasn't among them. We'll blow away that foul creature before it can touch St. Orient, sir, he boasted. Just give the command. Don't bother. Yuan replied. Even artillery would struggle to punch through a Trashamoth's hide, unlike the plastic men's vehicles. Focus on the escort, I'll fend off the beast. How strange. Yuan uttered those words without thinking,
when his first instinct a month ago would have been to throw any extra weight off the spirit train to speed it up rather than face such a dangerous spirit beast. Every fiber of his being told him he could take on the creature now. His allies' lack of worry and retort showed that they thought the same. No man climbed a mountain by fleeing from the hills. The dust cloud grew closer, as did the sputtering roars of old engines and the clinking of metal wheels pounding against the ground. The Plastic Men raiding party emerged as a chaotic mess of dirty mannequin bikers, trash trucks filled to the brim with humanoids with black bags for faces and tableware for hands, and makeshift cars built from scavenged parts. Yuan recognized the few first coil cultivators among them by the way their bodies merged with their vehicles, with some being little more than plastic torsos melded to their motorbikes or rubber masses filling out a car's seats. They advanced in a disorganized formation with no regard for self-preservation. They were little more than shepherds herding a giant forward. Yuan had only seen a trashamoth once before in his life, and the colossus lumbering after the spirit train was at least twice its size, enough to match 3 of Orient's wagons in length. Decades of accumulated plastic rash, gelatinous gasoline ooze, and orange sinew formed the bulk of the abomination's slug-like body. Sharp metal talons sprouted at the end of its 2 forelimbs and boasted claws capable of cutting a house in 2. The sick yellow smog Yuan had noticed earlier spewed forth from a set of 3 metal chimneys on its back, while the head reminded him a bit too much of Orient's locomotive, albeit that one boasted jagged teeth and a pair of vicious golden eyes on each side eyeing the spirit train with hunger. Half a dozen smaller mouths of steel and plastic gnashed along the monster's body. Ark had landed a 500-kilometer shot and attacked the gun from a day's ride away. She had to have known this monster would show up when she asked Yuan to relinquish his revolver. A would-be third coil cultivator unable to secure a pill usually had to kill a spirit beast and eat its core as a substitute. This was yet another test. One which Yuan would pass with a hail of gunfire. Yuan used sniper's bore to wrap his index finger in a cylindrical barrier, then slightly rifled his original design to improve precision. He stuffed a bullet crafted with item materialization inside the makeshift barrel, then aimed at one of the trashamoth's eyes. She poured into his bullet and vibrated it at a very specific frequency.
Ready?
Yuan asked, the noise of dozens of firearm safeties clicking in response.
Fire.
Yuan unleashed the first shot, and his allies followed through with a hail of bullets. His projectile hit one of the trashamoth's right eyes with the impact of a chi-charged handgun strike. The blast wasn't as big as Revolver's own shooting stars, but it blew up its target well enough. The trashamoth's main maw let out a bellowing low-pitched roar as yellow pus and poisonous blood leaked down its face. Yuan's allies didn't match his success. While there were a few good shots among the passengers, most were too untrained and the enemy was too far away for firearm projectiles to connect. Bucket and the other gunners had more luck. One artillery shot blew up a car, another landed close enough to 2 motorcycles to make them lose control of their trajectory and fall to the ground, while the third hit nothing. A few of their foes returned fire with flashball weapons and rubber bullets, but most focused on closing the gap. Plastic Men usually preferred the intimacy of a close kill and their Warband's equipment reflected their preferences. Harpoons arose from the back of their trash trucks, their barbed heads pointing at Orient's windows and ready to fire once in range. Not on Yuan's watch. Yuan didn't need to take a step back. He simply leaped into battle and crossed the distance in a single bound. He landed on the nearest Plastic Man's car with such force that he crushed the engine on impact. By the time the car and its drivers flew off its wheels, Yuan had already jumped onto the next one with a recoil kick.
This.
Yuan leapfrogged his way to the trashamoth and left a train wreck of devastation in his wake. His duel with Gaiak had already given him a taste of what his third coil-level body could achieve, but the last few days of cycling unlocked its full potential. Where Yuan once needed momentum to fly a few meters ahead, he now had to tone down his strength so as not to fly away. He could have easily leaped over a hill with barely any effort. Combining these immense jumps with the recoil fist resulted in quite the lethal combination. Yuan simply had to activate the technique upon landing on an enemy car to maximize its impact and then immediately jump away to the next target. The Plastic Men perished by the dozens, their vehicles shattered to pieces, their projectiles bouncing off his steel skin. They fared no better against Yuan than his old team did against Slash.
They were scraps to him.
Many considered the third coil to be the moment when cultivators moved beyond the reach of ordinary men, and living through it confirmed it to Yuan. His reflexes had sharpened so much that he could see rubber bullets fly at him at what seemed like an agonizingly slow pace. Most hit him because he didn't bother dodging.
They did nothing to him.
The few first coil cultivators among their numbers were hardly a blip on his radar either. A recoil shockwave crushed them like their kindred, and their attempt to harpoon him simply resulted in their weapons shattering against his chest. They simply couldn't hurt him. Slash had allowed himself to be shot. The realization only infuriated Yuan. His killer could have dodged his last bullet without any effort, yet decided to mock his victim by playing along and then crushing his hope. Yuan almost sympathized with the plastic men. Though he held no hesitation at tearing through them after they'd launched an unprovoked attack against him and his allies, he had been in their place more often than not. He didn't make a show of slaughtering his way through their forces. He simply did it. A great shadow passed over him, and a giant claw moved down to crush him. Yuan used a recoil shockwave to quickly move out of the way. The Trashamotha's hand crushed the vehicle wreckage he was previously on under its immense weight, the impact raising a cloud of dust and smoke in its wake. The spirit beast hadn't even targeted Yuan. It simply trampled anything unlucky enough to find itself between Orient and itself. The Trashamoth focused on the spirit train with the most mundane of emotions, pure, absolute hunger. Combining Gaiak's barrier-based flight technique with the recoil fist greatly improved Yuan's maneuverability in the air. He only had to use feng shui to create temporary anchors in the air that he could then exploit to direct his trajectory. Yuan used it to ascend upward and gain a better view of the battlefield. Yuan had single-handedly torn through a third of the enemy force, and his allies further cut down the warband to half its size. Normal marauders would have likely retreated after suffering such heavy losses, but plastic men didn't feel fear the same way humans did. They rode after the spirit train in utter silence and attacked without shouts or threats. They knew they could easily pull themselves back due to their lack of vitals or merge with their wounded. Yuan recalled that Jialong once tried to communicate with a captive plastic man, only to waste hours on a pointless task. Their kind didn't speak nor seem to understand vocal language. Yuan wasn't sure they even thought. The same way a human would, making conversation all but impossible. It made them quite unnerving to fight. A few trash trucks got close enough to the spirit train to harpoon it. Barbed chains struck the windows and metal wheels. Their vehicles weren't heavy enough to derail Orient's wagons, but it gave them a foothold onto the spirit train. A plastic man with blades for fingers attempted to climb into the treasure car, only to take a Molotov cocktail to the face and burn away while Bucket bombarded its vehicle. Yuan trusted his allies to manage on their own and focused on the true threat. The Trashamoth gained ground on Orient and would catch up to her in a minute. So Yuan punched it. He threw himself at one of the creature's eyes and then activated the recoil fist. The resulting shockwave threw noxious yellow sludge blood over Yuan's arm and hardly caused the monster harm. The Trashamotha's thick outer layers of trash absorbed most of the impact and its noxious blood burned his steel skin like acid. The wound would have liquefied Yuan's flesh and bones back when he hadn't crossed the third coil, but his chi-reinforced body reduced the potency to superficial burns. The pain was hardly noticeable compared to the strength of the late Gaiak's blows. This story has been stolen from Royal Road. If you read it on A. I'll need to pierce through this thing's hide to reach its vitals, if it has any, Yuan thought while coating his arm with elemental infusion to repair the damage. Repeated recoil blasts might punch through, but it'll quickly drain my chi. I need to find a less taxing method. Fire would be ideal. Yuan quickly considered his options and recalled his fight with Gaiak. The Flesh Mansion's sect cultivator took him by surprise by breathing flames from his mouth. This didn't seem like an innate technique to Yuan, so he wondered if he could mimic and adapt it to his path. His affinity lay with metal, which bent to fire. Creating flames directly would likely be beyond Yuan's power. However, he recalled using shotgun pellets charged with magnesium to produce incendiary projectiles. Since his body had become a living weapon, it should naturally be able to reproduce this phenomenon naturally. Deciding to test out his theory, Yuan inhaled deeply and cycled through his lungs. Engraving sutras into his metal flesh gave him greater awareness of his bodily processes and how to exploit them. He charged the gunsmoke inside his chest with chi, saturated it with magnesium extracted from his very bones, slowly heated it up until it started to itch, then exhaled. Yuan spat out blinding flames onto the Trashamotha's wounds. His breath was nowhere near as refined nor did it sustain the same rate of fire as Gaiak's own technique, but it was quite the light show nonetheless. Sparks spewed out of his mouth in straight lines and set the Trashamotha's sludge blood ablaze. Yuan decided to call the technique Dragon's Breath. The monster roared in pain and anger as it finally turned its head at Yuan before attempting to catch him in its immense jaws. Yuan flew along its body's length while sustaining his dragon's breath. The Trashamotha's plastic hide caught fire and melted from the searing heat. Flames slowly spread over its body and raised black smoke into the sky. The monster's smaller mouths retaliated by spewing noxious smog at Yuan in an attempt to counterattack. This, however, proved a fatal mistake on the monster's part. So great was the heat of Dragon's Breath that it ignited the Trashamotha's fumes long before they could reach their target. The monster's chimneys soon began to spew out fire rather than smoke, its hands tearing at its own hide to rip away the burning parts before the flames could spread any further. Tons of melted plastic soon fell off the monster's body. The Trashamoth attempted to catch Yuan within its immense talons, but the cultivator quickly wrapped himself in a cloud of black haze and slipped through its claws. Yuan analyzed his enemy's chi all the while, searching for a weakness. He eventually detected the Trashamoth's core buried deep within its immense skull. Now that his flames had softened the creature's hide, a powerful enough blow should reach its weak point. Yuan propelled himself above the Trashamoth with repeated recoil kicks, then wove a barrier around his right arm and used the left to wave another behind him. His aim was steady, natural, untouched by the smoke and chaos.
Recoil blast.
The technique that slew Gaiac sputtered forth from Yuan in a mighty shockwave. His improved barrier design let him direct and disperse the blowback in a way that wouldn't harm him while focusing the power on one point to maximize damage. The blast hit the Trashamoth in a devastating collision, the impact blowing up half its skull. Tons of burnt plastic and metal fell off onto the surrounding desert, unveiling a black core of coalesced sludge pulsating into a festering mass of orange sinews melded with fossilized plastic. Its chi was so foul it made Yuan nauseous just to look at it.
He didn't hesitate.
His second recoil blast utterly shattered the core and erupted out the other side of the Trashamoth's skull, leaving a gaping hole in its head. The spirit beast's chi erupted from its fatal wound in a tide of poison, while its many heads breathed their last. It collapsed onto the desert, crushing its plastic men herders under its weight and missing the spirit train by a few meters. It was easier than expected. Yuan knew size didn't matter much when evaluating a spirit beast's power, but that Trashamoth would have likely required the likes of Gaiac to take down. I can fly, I can breathe fire, I can kill a large spirit beast on my own easily enough. Any of these would have sounded unbelievable to Yuan not too long ago. All three of them underlined his meteoritic progress in the past month.
I'm strong now. Truly strong.
And it was nowhere near enough. Yuan already stood head and shoulders above Scraps in terms of power, but he had barely taken his first steps on the road of cultivation. The likes of Manhattan and the Inyong Khan had been there, done that, and progressed farther ahead still. He couldn't allow himself to feel satisfied with his current progress. He needed to keep that hunger burning inside him.
Keep pushing forward.
As Yuan chased after the spirit train to help its passengers mop up the remaining plastic men, he began to consider what other techniques he could adapt to the gun path. His thoughts wandered to the first cultivator he ever defeated, an Oni who could transform his body into mist at will. While Yuan's black haze mimicked his fog-shrouding fist technique, he had yet to find a way to fully turn his body intangible. Toshiro achieved that feat while in the second coil. Yuan had no excuse for not doing the same one step ahead on the road to the Tao. Now that he had gained a better mastery of his unique physiology, he would try it out. From metal to gunsmoke.